LoveLore Library. Chapter 4:17. Now she did not leave alone, and when she returns, she would not be alone. The mountain road was long, and unknowingly the sky had turned dark. Because it was a mountain road, there were no inns on the mountain, and one could only lodge at a farmer's house. Fortunately, that farmer's family had a warm-hearted temperament and warmly received everyone. They even cooked a lot of food and wine. Because they had to hurry on with their journey, Enchanting and the rest did not dare to drink alcohol, as they were afraid that drinking would cause trouble and delay the next day's departure. It was Meow who did not know if it was because her mood was good or because the plum blossom wine that the farmer's family brewed was sweet and intoxicating that after drinking a few cups, her cheeks turned into a peach color. Why did Jiao Jiao drink so much? Luo Shuayan initially did not notice, but when she saw it clearly, she could not help but turn pale with fright. Seeing Shen Miao's hand supporting her cheek with a drowsy look, she quickly reached out to check her head. Most likely older sister does not know the power of this wine. The female owner of the farmer's family smiled. The plum blossom wine that we brew ourselves has a sweet taste, but the after effect is strong. Our family's girl often drinks too much and would be drunk. But one would be fine after a sleep and would not feel dizzy the next day. For need not worry. Luo Shuayan then felt relieved. Shen Qiu looked at Shen Miao's somewhat drunk look and felt it was funny, did not think that younger sister would also get drunk one day. Really interesting. When Shen Qiu returned this time, he saw a calm and gentle Shen Miao. She was so mature that Shen Qiu would sometimes have the illusion that Shen Miao was the older sister. Sometimes he would miss the Shen Miao of the past. Even though she was willful and impolite, she still had the temperament that a young lady should have. Now looking at her appearance, it made Shen Qiu recall the Shen Miao of the past and unknowingly felt some familiarity. Brat. Enchanting kicked Shen Qiu. Your younger sister is already drunk to this extent and you still make trouble. Shen Qiu quickly stuck out his tongue and pretended to be afraid as he begged for mercy. The whole family, including the farmer's family, were all lively and happy. Where was the disappointment and helplessness of leaving one's hometown? Shen Miao's hand supported her chin as she squinted at the scene in front. Even though this plum blossom wine was intoxicating, she was still somewhat sober. He was indeed very happy today. Everything went according to the plan. In fact, other than letting Enchanting stay away from the whirlpool of the Ding capital, it was also because there would be a smallpox outbreak in the Ding capital in a year's time. Even though nothing happened in the previous lifetime, she was not willing to let her family take any risks at all. Staying away from the Ding capital meant staying away from danger. Even if he wanted revenge, he had to protect his family first. The lively dinner lasted until late at night before dispersing. The enthusiastic owner of the farm arranged enough rooms for the few of them. Originally Luo Shuayan wanted to share a room with Shen Miao, but Shen Miao insisted on staying in the room next to the wall of the farm and even had to sleep alone. It was a separate room, and it was far away from the others. If they moved in, they would be separated from Luo Shuayan and the others. Enchanting initially felt that it was not good, and if there was danger, he feared that he would not be able to rush over to rescue, but he did not know what was wrong with Shen Miao that she insisted on staying in that room even though she was drunk. When the mistress of the farmer's family saw this, she smiled and said, "Sister, you probably want to see the flowers outside the wall. The flowers are very beautiful under the snow and all young ladies like it. For need not worry. Even though our place is small, there are no bandits or robbers. If you are worried about sister, it is all right to set up a tent outside and find a few more guards." Only then did everyone realize that when they opened the window of the house against the courtyard wall, they could see a large snow-white garden. There were still winter plum blossoms in the garden that had yet to wither. Under the clear moonlight, the shadows of the blossoms swayed on the snowy ground. It was a very beautiful scene. Shen Qiu was angry and funny at the same time and pinched Shen Miao's nose. Delicate bag. No wonder you are called Jiao Jiao. You are drunk and still looking forward to a place with good scenery. Chapter 4:18. Luo Shuayan hit down Shen Qiu's hand and said angrily, "Do not move around." She then looked at the somewhat confused drunk Shen Miao and shook her head, "Not willing to sleep with me and still want to sleep at such a far place. Let him. O Qing, Ah Qi, and the rest set up a tent outside the courtyard for the night. Jingzhe and Gu Yu will come out after serving young lady to change." This farmer's house was not like the previous residence in the Ding capital, as there was a bedroom and an outer room that allowed Jingzhe and Gu Yu to sleep on the small couch in the outer room. Luo Shuayan and Shen Axayan were not harsh people, and there was no reason for Jingzhe and Gu Yu to sleep on the floor to serve Shen Miao. Thinking that this farmer's house was not big and with Ah Qi, Mo Qing and the rest guarding outside, there would not be any problem. Jingzhe and Gu Yu helped Shen Miao to change her clothes and washed her face before leaving the house. Mo Qing, Ah Qi and the rest who had set up the tent in the courtyard also prepared to take turns to keep watch. Jingzhe and Gu Yu went up to warn them again before leaving. In that beautiful little room, there was only Shen Miao left alone. And Shen Miao, who was supported by Jingzhe to climb up the couch, suddenly climbed up from the couch. The after effects of the plum blossom wine finally surged up at this moment, and Shen Miao's clear eyes were in a state of chaos. She swayed as she stood up and wanted to walk towards the window, but she stumbled and almost knocked into the corner of the table and fell down. In the darkness, a pair of strong arms held her up and one could vaguely smell the faint fragrance of the other party. A familiar voice sounded beside her ears with a hint of ridicule, "TSK, actually pouncing onto another's body." Shen Miao took the opportunity to wrap her arms around his waist to make herself stand more stable, but did not realize that this action of hers made the latter's body stiffen. After a moment, there was a "cheat" sound and a flame sprang up. That person did not know where to find a match and lit the oil lamp in the room. The windows of the farmer's house were all wooden carvings. Those were real wooden carvings, and there was not even a layer of white paper. Even if there was a lamp in the room, one would not be able to see it from the outside. Thus the few people in the courtyard did not notice any abnormalities in the room. Under the blurry light, he was able to see the man's facial features clearly. Snow-white fox fur coat, dark red embroidered clothes, red lips, white teeth, a pair of black eyes like peach blossom. The embroidered clothes in the night had a graceful bearing. If it was not Xie Jingxing, who else could it be? Shen Miao was surprised for a moment and said, "Xie Jingxing." When she said this, her body became heavy and she accidentally leaned against Xie Jingxing, almost hugging him. Xie Jingxing frowned. "Such a strong smell of alcohol, how much did you drink?" He looked at Shen Miao and said with some disdain, "I sent you off with good intentions, but who knew that I would meet a drunkard? You're the one who's drunk." Shen Miao immediately retorted. "All right, you know me and still talk back to me. It seems that you are not drunk," Xie Jingxing said as he helped Shen Miao to the couch. Then, he brought the lamp closer to him. Under the dim light, Shen Miao was wearing a plain white inner garment and her hair was disheveled as she looked over ignorantly. It was completely different from her usual astute and calm appearance, and she really had the appearance of a delicate and pitiful young lady. Xie Jingxing thought for a moment and finally could not hold it back and fiercely pinched her face. Shen Miao glared at him angrily. It was rare to see her with such a childish look, and Xie Jingxing felt that it was interesting. He only thought that Shen Miao was drunk, and as the saying goes, wine spits out the truth. Perhaps he would be able to ask something. "Who am I?" Xie Jingxing, Shen Miao quickly answered. "Know what kind of person Xie Jingxing is?" Shen Miao stared at him and slowly frowned but did not speak. Xie Jingxing felt that she was looking at him strangely and thought that this girl was cursing him in her heart. Who knew that Shen Miao suddenly smiled and said, "A wonderful and stunning character." Chapter 419. Xie Jingxing, he stared at Shen Miao thoughtfully and asked, "Are you pretending to be drunk?" The little marquis of the Xia family, a young talent, an eternal character, a heroic age. The words at the back gradually became softer, as if she could not remember. Xie Jingxing initially had some suspicions, but when he saw that Shen Miao did not seem to be pretending, he felt somewhat strange and raised his brows. "Did not think that in your heart, you are so satisfied with me." He leaned closer and teased, "Could it be that you admire me?" Shen Miao reached out and pushed his head away. Xie Jingxing was somewhat speechless. If it was on normal days, it would be very interesting to tease Shen Miao. But now that Shen Miao was so drunk that even the eternal character evaluation came out, it would be very boring to tease her now. He said, "Originally wanted to see you one last time. Since you are this drunk, forget it. Let us part here." He was about to leave after speaking, but who knew that with a plopped sound, Shen Miao fell from the couch to the ground again. Xie Jingxing first wanted to help Shen Miao up, but then stopped and crossed his arms at his chest as he stood calmly at the side. He watched Shen Miao struggling on the ground, and after admiring for a while, he then said, "One should really let you see your current appearance." Shen Miao was dizzy from drinking and her body was soft, so how would she be able to stand up? She flopped on the ground for a long time, but to no avail. Xie Jingxing finally could not stand it anymore and mercifully helped her up before sitting on the couch. He then heard Shen Miao saying, "Li Gonggong, Ben Gong want to see the fireworks." In the quiet night, Shen Miao's words were exceptionally clear. "Li Gonggong, Ben Gong want to see the fireworks." The charcoal fire in the room seemed to have solidified. Xie Jingxing's originally curled lips slowly lowered down and his pair of peach blossom eyes were no longer filled with a romantic smile. He slightly squatted down and his line of sight was at the same level as Shen Miao, who was sitting on the couch. It was a gentle action, but his eyes gradually turned cold. He said, "What did you say?" Shen Miao opened her eyes and looked at him. Under the warm light, her eyes became clearer, and in those clear eyes, there was a hint of drunkenness, which made the young and inexperienced young lady suddenly have a few more womanly charm. She delicately and haughtily stretched out a hand, as if to place it on the hand of a palace servant. She ordered, eunuchly, "I want to see the fireworks. Go and call the crown prince and princess over." Crown prince? Princess? Xie Jingxing stared at Shen Miao in front of him. When he smiled, he was as moving as the spring flowers and autumn moon. When he didn't smile, he was as dangerous as a silent abyss. Anyone who looked at him would feel like they were being mocked. He looked at Shen Miao, and as he looked, he suddenly chuckled. Even though there was a smile on his face, there was no trace of a smile in his eyes. He gently hooked up Shen Miao's chin, and when he did such a lecherous action, it was graceful and natural, so gentle that it made one drown in his dark eyes. He asked, "Shen Miao, do you want to be the Empress?" Shen Miao blinked at him and said, "That was originally mine." "Yours?" "Ben Gong's." Xie Jingxing slowly tightened his fingers and Shen Miao frowned in dissatisfaction as she felt pain on her chin. "Little girl, you already have the ambition to be the Empress at such a young age." His tone was unclear, but his eyes were dangerous. A woman with ambition is the most beautiful. "But you are still not a woman." Shen Miao also looked at him. Under the bright moonlight, the snowy shadows, the swaying plum blossoms, the two people facing each other. It should have been a romantic scene with beautiful flowers and full moon, but the atmosphere of danger and ambiguity was overwhelming, mixed with probing and danger. She was like a young lady who was raised pampered. If it was an ordinary female, when she grew older, she would only worry about marrying a good husband. But she had been patiently planning step by step, scheming against the world behind her back. Even though one had guessed that she had ambition, but when one really heard it, one could not help but be surprised. Chapter 420. That little girl was covered in thorns. From an idiot to a chess player, from the eye-catching daughter of a general's wife to a noble daughter who had lost her power, it seemed that she had never changed. It was this docile yet ferocious gaze that was filled with nobility and pride. She was born with the bearing of someone who had been in a high position for many years. Her words, uniquely, "I want to go see the fireworks," were long and lingering, like a bell ringing in the quiet night, ringing in people's hearts. Even if it was a dream, her aura could be said to be that of an empress. Right now, she was still a little girl. After a few more years, her beauty and elegance would be hard to conceal. Perhaps she would really have the bearing of a motherly model of the world. Xie Jingxing slowly released the hand that was holding Shen Miao's chin and glanced at her with difficulty. Pausing, he was about to get up and leave but heard Shen Miao muttering, "Xiao Li Zi, go and bring Ben Gong's cloak over. Ben Gong is cold." In an instant, he changed from eunuch Li to little Li. Xie Jingxing's originally complicated emotions were stirred up by her and he did not know whether to laugh or cry. He asked, "You order me cold?" Shen Miao looked at him aggrievedly. Xie Jingxing took a deep breath and suppressed the thought of picking Shen Miao up and beating her up. He took off his cloak and threw it on Shen Miao. Shen Miao wrapped his cloak and gave him a smile. "Later Ben Gong will reward you with a few bolts of satin." His favor was boundless. Xie Jingxing looked at her expressionlessly. "Many thanks for Nyang Nyang's love. This official will take his leave." Just as he was about to leave, Shen Miao grabbed his sleeve. The Shen Miao tonight was too abnormal. Xie Jingxing had never dreamt that the drunk Shen Miao would be like this. He thought that he could take advantage of the drunkenness to bully Shen Miao, but in the end, it seemed that he was the one being bullied. The dignified young master of the Xia family was being ordered around like a eunuch. Eunuch Li. Little Li. Shen Miao pulled Xie Jingxing's sleeves and pulled him down until Xie Jingxing squatted down and was at eye level with her before she was satisfied. She released her hand and grabbed Xie Jingxing's collar. Xie Jingxing was baffled by Shen Miao's actions. One could only hear Shen Miao muttering to herself. Originally in the previous dynasty, when the princess was widowed, the male attendants were kept. "Since His Majesty doesn't treat me well, I'll treat it as my husband's death and find a male companion." When Xie Jingxing heard the first part of the sentence, he couldn't understand it, but when he heard the latter part, he found it unbelievable. He stared at Shen Miao. "In your dream, is it a disfavored and crippled empress? It's not falling out of favor." When Shen Miao heard it, she glared at him. Xie Jingxing nodded his head and said lazily, "Cursing the death of one's husband after falling out of favor. You must be the poison empress. But you look really good." Shen Miao suddenly said, "Are you the new gigolo?" Xie Jingxing, that princess of the previous dynasty, found a handsome male, and Ben Gong had seen the portrait before, but felt that he was not as beautiful as you. Shen Miao said, "If you follow Ben Gong will ensure that you will not have to worry about food and clothing in the lower half of your life." Xie Jingxing was initially shocked by Shen Miao's words of gigolo, but when he heard the latter sentence, he was completely stunned. This is being treated as a male pet. He was still in a daze when he saw the hand that was grabbing his collar suddenly exerted strength, and there was a soft thing that stuck to him. The cold little mouth licked his lips, and after a nibble, a mouthful of sweet plum blossom wine came to his face. "From now on, you are Ben Gong's person." Shen Miao released her hand and looked at him with a dignified smile. When Xie Jingxing recovered to his senses, he only had one thought. He wanted to strangle this female in front of him. But just at this moment, a whistle was suddenly heard from outside. That was the signal given by his people. Mo Qing and the rest had noticed the movements. Xie Jingxing gritted his teeth and glanced at Shen Miao before flying out. Qi opened the door but saw that there was nothing inside. He scratched his head and said, "There is no one. Most likely there was a mistake." Mo Qing frowned. In the snow where the plum blossoms were swaying, there was a bit of uneasiness on the dark red-robed handsome youth's face. When the middle-aged man beside saw the situation, he could not help but ask, "Master seems to be somewhat uneasy. Just now, what happened inside?" He only went to bid farewell to the young lady of the Shen family, so why was there something wrong when he came out? The meaning in the red-clad youth's eyes was unclear. Tai Yi, I look like. Tai Yi was puzzled, like what? Forget it. He gritted his teeth and replied, "Go." All along, Luo Sui had been protecting the people of the Shaochun city to live and work in peace and contentment, but because it was too far away from the Ding capital, everyone was well aware that this kind of job was not a good one. In addition, after so many years, the Luo family's army was almost scattered, and the Luo family only had some prestige in the Shaochun city. When the guards at the city gates saw Luo Shuiyan taking out the Luo family's identity token, they were suddenly in awe and sent someone to pass the news to the Luo family. The Shaochun city was only such a big place, and when the Shen family brought a group of people into the city, it was immediately noticed by the surrounding commoners. One after another, they went forward to inquire and found out that it was the Luo family's married daughter who brought her family over. Immediately there was a wave of liveliness. Chapter 422. Jingzhe quietly lifted the curtain of the carriage and looked at the outerwear before saying to Shen Miao, "Young lady, this is the Shaochun city." Shen Miao glanced outside. The Shaochun city was not as unbearable as what the noble females in the Ding capital said. Even though it was a small place at the borders, it looked lively. It was just that the sandstorm was a little strong. Because of the sandstorm, the women's skin was slightly darker, and they were not as delicate as the women in the capital. Perhaps it was because of the open culture of the people, they were all lively and quick-witted. Some of them even looked a little mischievous, making people feel that they were full of vitality. There were peddlers and stalls along the streets, so there was no shortage of goods. The more Jingzhe looked, the happier she became, and the original apprehension was swept away. "Young lady, the Shaochun city and the Ding capital are not much different. Does Jiao Jiao like it here?" Luo Shuiyan asked uneasily. What she was most afraid of was that Shen Miao would not be used to living here. Luo Shuiyan grew up in the Shaochun city, so of course there was no problem. Shen Qiu and Shen Xian were military generals who had been on the battlefield and would not say anything more. She was just a spoiled daughter that she needed to worry about. Shen Miao smiled, "It's good here." Only then did Luo Shuiyan feel relieved. She smiled and said, "Let's go to your maternal grandfather's house. You haven't seen your grandfather since you became a governor. You have 2 uncles, 3 older brothers, and 1 older sister. They're all good people. I'm sure they'll like you very much when you get there." Luo Furen died early, and Luo Sui had been a widower for so many years. The Luo family had 3 siblings, and Luo Shuiyan was the youngest. When Shen Miao was born, the Luo family came all the way to the Ding capital to see her once, but after that, because the Shaochun city was too far away and one could not leave this side, Shen Miao and the Luo family had never met before. In the previous lifetime, Shen Miao's impression of the Luo family was also very vague, and now that she heard Luo Shuiyan saying it, she also smiled. At this moment, many people had already gathered in front of the Luo family's gate. There were commoners who came to watch the show, and of course, there were also people from the Luo family. Luo Sui stood at the very front, and behind him were 2 middle-aged couples. Behind the couple were 3 youths and a young girl. The youths all had upright features and were awe-inspiring. Although they were still young, they had the demeanor of a valiant general. The girl's skin was a healthy wheat color. She had a pair of almond-shaped eyes and a small diamond-shaped mouth. One look and you could tell that she was a shrewish person. She pulled the youth beside her and asked, "Big brother, what kind of person do you think my cousin is?" The young man who was stopped by her had a good temperament. He said warmly, "He should be a good person." "What do you mean by not bad? Can't you make it clearer?" The young girl was unrelenting. "Is she pretty? You see those Ding capital young ladies that came to our Shaochun city, each and every one of them are very beautiful, but their temperament is so delicate that it makes one feel disgusted. Moreover, the official's young lady that came to the Shaochun city as a guest last year said that she knew Biao's younger sister." She lowered her voice, but because of her crisp voice, it could still be heard. One heard that Biao's younger sister's reputation in the Ding capital is not good. "Tanner!" A loud shout interrupted the young female's words, and it was Luo Sui who opened his mouth and stared fiercely at that young female called Tanner. The young female quickly straightened her body and stuck out her tongue and no longer spoke. She did not speak, but a slightly younger and more lively lad came over and pulled Tanner's hand, saying, "Grandpa is so biased. This cousin has not come yet, but he is already protecting her like this. I want to see what kind of person this Biao's younger sister is." Shen Xian had been fighting in the northwest region all year round and would pass by the Shaochun city whenever he went to the northwest border, thus he would come over every year. Shen Qiu and the Luo family also knew each other. If one were to say that the person that the Luo family was most interested in was Shen Miao, whom they had never seen since she was born. The world was so big that it could be said that it was big, but it could also be said that it was small. In the Shaochun city, there would occasionally be some officials who were demoted or passing by, so they would know a thing or two about the rumors in the Ding capital. What kind of person was Shen Miao? Regarding the rumors of the idiot D daughter, it was also famous in the Shaochun city. Chapter 423. Hearing of one's reputation was not as good as seeing. Today one could finally see it. There were so many commoners surrounding outside, and speaking of which, the majority of them wanted to see what Shen Miao looked like. Just as this young female and that youth were whispering, a line of horse carriages slowly came over, and the ones riding at the front were Shen Xian and Shen Qiu. Behind them was a group of soldiers. "Father!" Shen Xian got off the horse and Shen Qiu quickly followed up and ran to Luo Sui with a smile. "Waizu." Luo Sui's gaze swept across the father and son pair before landing on the horse carriage. After all, it was not nice to see too much, as Luo Sui wanted to see his own granddaughter the most. A slightly plump foreign with a friendly smile said, "Youngest Gu and Jiao Jiao should be in the horse carriage. One fear that they are tired after walking for such a long time." Just as the words were spoken, one saw the curtain of the horse carriage being lifted and Jingzhe and Guyu helped Luo Shuiyan down. Luo Shuiyan then reached out to the horse carriage and a young female came down. That young female bent down from the horse carriage, and when she raised her head, a pretty face was revealed. When she turned her head back, Luo Shuiyan was already holding her hand and walking forward. "Jiao Jiao, let us go home." The young female called Tanner opened her mouth but did not speak. The Shaochun city was windy and dry, thus the young females had dark skin and it was rare to see fair skin, not to mention such a white and juicy young female. That young female's brows were very delicate, and because of her snow-white skin, it was even more picturesque. Black eyebrows, black eyes, a small nose, and rosy lips. However, the most surprising thing was her temperament. She was held by Luo Shuiyan and looked like a very delicate young female, but under Luo Shuiyan's valiant and heroic bearing, she did not seem as weak as the iris flower. Instead, she looked more dignified and noble, as if she was the leader. The surrounding commoners and the Luo family were somewhat dumbfounded. One's bearing was important when looking at a person, but a woman's aptitude was the most important and beauty was secondary. This Shen family's young female's aptitude was more captivating than her appearance. She followed Luo Shuiyan step by step until she was in front of Luo Sui. Luo Sui was tall and had deep eyes and a high nose. Compared to Shen Xian's boorishness, he appeared more serious and unreasonable. He frowned as he stared at Shen Miao. With such a cold look, if it was a young lady with less courage, she would have been scared to tears. Moreover, Shen Miao looked like a delicate and noble young lady from the Ding capital, so everyone thought that she would be scared out of her wits. Tanner and the young man beside her raised the corners of their mouths to watch the show. Shen Miao raised her head and looked at Luo Sui. Her brows relaxed and her body was soft. Apparently she was not nervous because of Luo Sui's reaction. Her eyes were calm and she even smiled slightly. That kind of attitude of a superior towards a subordinate actually made Luo Sui stunned for a moment. The attitude of the superior towards the inferior. The Luo family in the Shaochun city was in existence like the Lord of the Earth City, so how could there be someone in a higher position? After Luo Sui was stunned for a moment, he suddenly laughed out loud. When she smiled, the nervous people around her were all shocked. Luo Sui patted Shen Miao's head and shouted energetically, "Girl, why did not call me?" "Grandfather," Shen Miao answered meekly. Luo Shuiyan heaved a sigh of relief. Luo Sui and Shen Xian were different. Shen Xian pampered Shen Miao to the heavens, but Luo Sui was a strict father since young. Even she herself had some fear of Luo Sui when she was young. Now that Luo Sui was older, he was not as dignified as before, but the habit of scaring young ladies had not changed. She was afraid that Shen Miao would be scared, but fortunately Shen Miao's reaction was not that big. Faintly, Luo Shuiyan's heart was somewhat proud. Shen Miao's attitude made Luo Shuiyan sigh of relief, but at the same time, it made the surrounding people somewhat surprised. The young ladies from the Ding capital did not seem to only know how to cry and live extravagantly, and seemed to have some courage. Tanner was unconvinced as he whispered to the young youth, "Must be pretending not to be afraid." Chapter 424. The oldest youth with the best temperament looked at Shen Miao thoughtfully and did not speak. Luo Shuiyan then pulled Shen Miao forward to introduce her. Other than Luo Sui, the Luo family had two other sons and they were Shen Miao's two Jojo, Luo Lianing and Luo Liantai. Luo Lianing's wife was Madame Yu, a gentle and honest woman. He gave birth to two sons, Luo Ling and Luo Sa. Shen Miao's second Jo Shu Luo Liantai's wife was Madame Ma. Her maiden family did business and was shrewd, giving birth to a pair of siblings. The elder sister was called Luo Tan, and the younger brother was called Luo Qian. Luo Ling was Shen Miao's eldest Biao older brother. This Biao older brother was 18 this year and had a gentle and honest temperament, exactly the same as Madame Yu. When he saw him, he would greet him gently and politely and was a very considerate person. And second Biao older brother, Luo Sa, was 17 years old and also Luo Ling's younger twin brother. He looked at Shen Miao and snorted coldly before ridiculing, "Young lady of the Ding capital, can she withstand the sandstorms of the Shaochun city?" He was kicked by Luo Lianing. That Luo Tan was 16 this year and had some suspicions toward Shen Miao. Her attitude was not warm and was more curious. Luo Tan's younger brother was the same age as Shen Miao and kept sizing Shen Miao up. He had a round face and was somewhat picky. After greeting the Luo family's circle of people and recognizing them, Luo Sui let Luo Shuiyan bring them to the residence first. The Luo residence was a place where a large family lived together, and they all lived in harmony and love. The Shin family was settled in the courtyard that Luo Shuiyan had before she was married, so they could stay there. When the servants went to tidy up the room, everyone talked in the hall. After the initial excitement, it was time to get down to business. The Luo family and the Shin family were different. When the Shin family was in the Ding capital, because Shin Gui and Shin Wan took the path of civil officials and was different from Shin Xayan, naturally there would not be any discussions in court. In addition, they weren't blood relatives to begin with, and there was a layer of separation between them, so these private matters were even less likely to be brought up. The Luo family was different as they were all one family. Not only Luo Lianing and Luo Liantai could listen, Luo Ling and the other juniors could also listen, and even the females could listen. After Shin Xayan's family came, they naturally wanted to listen to it. Yener, what plans do you have for the future after returning to the Shaochun city? Luo Sui asked. Shin Xayan had previously written a letter to inform about the matter of his tiger Tally being taken away and retreating to the Shaochun city. It was just that they were too far away at that time to discuss it. Now that they were right in front of him, he had to ask about it. Luo Shuiyan smiled and said, "Why does father ask like this? Since one came to the Shaochun city, naturally one should live well here." Regarding the matter of reviving the Luo family's army, Luo Shuiyan and Shin Xayan still did not know how to tell Luo Sui. With Luo Sui's inflexible character, he would need some grinding. Third younger sister. It was Luo Lianing who opened his mouth. He glanced at Shin Xayan and hesitated for a moment before asking, but the Shin family army was taken in just like that. Is there really no turning back? They were generals, so they understood the significance of an army to a general. Shin Xayan had been on the battlefield for so many years, and it was not easy for him to suddenly be an idle ordinary person. If it was them, they would also be indignant. Shin Xayan cupped his hands and said, "Eldest brother, rather than complaining, it is better to let nature take its course. The Shaochun city is also very good. I also want to spend some time at the place where Shuiyan lived." Hearing that, Luo Sui looked at Shin Xayan a few more times, and the serious expression on his face eased up a little. "It is rare that you have changed your temperament." Everyone was clear about Shin Xayan's fiery and straightforward temperament, so for him to say such peaceful words was indeed out of everyone's expectations. Shin Miao looked at the Luo family's different expressions and suddenly asked, "Grandfather, one heard that there are 2 Ju at the Shaochun city's border. How can it be that easy?" Shin Miao's expression did not change as she lightly said, "Only food and tools for more than 10 years. Don't you feel that it is too easy to satisfy?" Everyone was surprised for a moment. Luo Qian's age was similar to Shin Miao, and he asked curiously, "Biao youngest sister, what do you mean? If it was me, I would not be so satisfied." Shin Miao replied warmly, "There are brave soldiers, strong horses and retreating grasslands. All of these, as compared to the scattered soldiers in the Shaochun city and the broken weapons, are much better. Why not fight for it? If one does not fight, it is because one is not familiar with the route to the Shaochun city. But after exploring for more than 10 years, for such a small city, even if one only comes once a year and only goes to one place every time, the map can be drawn out." She tilted her head and smiled. "When 2 armies confront each other, one side is fully prepared but do not take action. Is it because of the rules that have been observed for so many years and must be abided by? Who said it?" Chapter 426. For a long time, no one in the room spoke. The 2 Ju did not have any ambitions towards the Shaochun city, and every time, because of the lack of supplies, they would snatch things, and everyone was used to it. Who knew that Shin Miao's words today from another aspect, an aspect that they had never thought about before, awakened them from their dreams? Not bad, the Turks had everything, so why couldn't they have ambition? If the two Jew wanted to take over the Shao Chun city, how could the people in the Shao Chun city resist? Luo Sa's expression also slowly changed. He looked at Shen Miao, and even though his tone was still not good, compared to the anger just now, it had eased a lot. He said, "Then what do you want to say?" "I see that the Luo family's army is not as tightly gathered as the Shen family's army." Shen Miao said it politely. How was it not as tightly gathered as the Shen family's army? It was obviously a plate of loose sand. Seeing the flash of pain in Luo Sui's eyes, Shen Miao smiled gently. When one was young, one had heard from mother about the heroic bearing of Waizu leading the Luo family's army into battle. Waizu had never thought of restoring the glory of the Luo family's army. The glory of the Luo family army was restored once again. Everyone in the room sucked in a breath of cold air. Even Shen Axian and Luo Shuayan looked at Shen Miao with some disbelief. Luo Qian's and Luo Tan's eyes brightened. The younger generation would always look forward to unlimited glory, and the scene that Shen Miao described would at least greatly satisfy the vanity of the youths and females. Luo Ling and Luo Sa were older and did not show that eagerness, but there was still a trace of expectation in Luo Sa's eyes. Luo Sui looked at Shen Miao for a while and suddenly laughed. "You, this little girl, your ambition is not small. It is rare for a place like the Ding capital to be able to raise such a hard bone like you." His words were filled with appreciation towards Shen Miao. Luo Shuayan and Shen Axian immediately felt honored. But it was only for a moment before Luo Sui sighed and said in an unclear tone, "It is just that girl, to restore the glory of the Luo family's army. How would it be as simple as you said? Soldiers, horses, and rations all cost money. How could the Luo family afford it? It's useless to raise an army. Little girl, do you want to waste all the money of my Luo family on this? Soldiers are trained for 1,000 days to be used in a single moment. But those soldiers were raised by the treasury silver, like the Luo family's army that was far away in a small place. Emperor Wen Hui could rest assured and naturally would not allocate any silver for the Luo family to bear the expenses of such a troop. Yet, they didn't know who they should be dealing with and who they should be fighting against. It was indeed sad. The imperial court is not willing to give the Luo clan money because the Luo clan's army is not outstanding. But if the Luo family army's prestige was outstanding and they won the battle, His Majesty would take the initiative to send money to them in order to appease the various factions in the court. As for the enemy, Shen Miao smiled gently. Far away there is the Qin country in Great Liang. Nearby there is the Tuju and Xiong Nu Ming Qi never had a lack of opponents, and with the advancement of their military strength, naturally they would be sent to further battlefields. Grandfather, what do you think? Let's not talk about what she said, but the way she talked and smiled as she analyzed the various forces, and the way she smiled and tilted her head could be seen clearly. She was obviously a pampered young lady from a noble family, but she made people feel that she was a tenacious woman who had climbed from the bottom of society. Luo Sui suddenly got angry. He suddenly stood up and flicked his sleeves before saying coldly, "There is no need to mention the matter of reorganizing the Luo family's army. I do not agree. Shuayan, bring them down to rest. There is no need to discuss this matter in the future." Finishing, he did not even look at the people in the hall and turned to leave. Luo Sui's anger was inexplicable and Luo Shuayan was also very puzzled. Shen Qiu touched Shen Miao's head and firmly stood on Shen Miao's side. "Younger sister is good." Luo Sa swept a glance over and whispered to Luo Ling, "This Biao younger sister is not simple." Luo Ling smiled and said, "Perhaps." Luo Tan's lips twitched. What is so great about just talking glibly? Even grandfather was angered. Luo Qian shook his head and his eyes stared at Shen Miao, who was talking to Shen Qiu. Not only glibly talking, she also looks very pretty. Older sister is prettier than you. Luo Tan glared at him fiercely. Chapter 427. The days in the Luo family was thus settled down. Shin Xian and Shin Qiu were masters that could not stay idle, and would train the soldiers at the simple and crude training grounds outside the Luo family's residence. Naturally, they were training the front line of the Shin family's army. Those frontline soldiers were the kitchen soldiers, and after being tormented by Shin Xian daily, they were miserable, and Shin Xian also trained till he was angry. Luo Shuayan was busy visiting friends and relatives. The Shaochun city was the place where she lived during her childhood and teenage years, and there were many close friends here. Every day she would bring Shin Miao out to visit her old friends, and inexplicably, Shin Miao got to know a bunch of Furens. Initially everyone served young Lady Jiao, who came from Mingqi, cautiously, and the food she ate was the most elaborate, the silk thread was the most delicate, the snacks were made in different ways, and even the flowers and plants were trimmed more beautifully than before. In the past, those female officials who came to the Shaochun city from the Ding capital had some temper, and everyone was afraid that they would not be careful and not serve Shin Miao well. Who knew that after staying for a period of time, one would discover that the previous thoughts were superfluous. Shin Miao blended in very well in the Shaochun city, and did not receive any special treatment. There would occasionally be hail in the Shaochun city, and Shin Miao was only somewhat curious and not afraid. After a long time, the Luo family gradually put down their guard against this Biao young lady. Among the 4 juniors of the Luo family, Luo Ling and Luo Sa had started to take up positions in the guards, and were rarely seen. Luo Tan and Luo Qian spent more time at home, and when Shin Miao gave her a mirror, Luo Tan shook hands with Shin Miao. As for Luo Qian, he had a lively temperament, and was like a grown-up Su Ming Lang, pestering Shin Miao all day to tell her stories of the Ding capital. Shin Miao did not need to think about Fu Xiu Yi's matters in the Shaochun city, and her mind was much clearer. She treated Luo Qian as a younger brother. On this day, Luo Qian and Luo Tan came to Shin Miao's courtyard to look for her. The Shaochun city was not comparable to the Ding capital, and if one went to the Ding capital, one could still go shopping. The big and small shops would not be finished even after a few months, but the Shaochun city was small, and there was not much to shop after a few days. Shin Miao stayed in the residence, and Luo Qian and Luo Tan felt bored, so they came over to talk to her. Luo Qian was eating the Jiangnan snacks that the kitchen made for Shin Miao as he said, "Yesterday I went to the drill grounds to watch older brother Qiu train the soldiers. Even though those soldiers were not good, older brother Qiu's martial arts were very high. And cousin Qiu's bodyguard Mo, I couldn't even last a few moves against him. Cousin, can you ask cousin Qiu to teach me a few moves?" Shin Miao smiled, "If you want to learn, just tell eldest brother directly. He will definitely agree." Really? Luo Qian's youthful nature instantly made him happy. Speaking of which, it was strange. Most of the gentlemen in the Ding capital were arrogant, but because they had experienced too many things in their youth, they would show some slyness that was not commensurate with their age. However, the younger generation of the Luo clan was different. For example, Luo Qian was sincere and straightforward. He had the innocence of a young man, and it was easy for others to have a good impression of him. Biaomei, Luo Qian was also very close to this good-looking and docile little Biaomei and had long regarded her as one of his own. He said, "Qiu Biaomei's martial arts are really very good to look at. Is he the number 1 person in the Ding capital?" No. It should be the number 1 person in Mingqi. Eldest brother and second brother's martial arts are the best among us, but still lost to older brother Qiu's hands. Luo Tan, who had been flipping through the picture book, finally could not bear to listen anymore. She bit the tangerine in her mouth and rolled her eyes at Luo Qian. "Are you stupid? So ignorant and ill-informed. Not to mention the Luo family's people, not to mention that I am your older sister. Really shameful." Shin Miao was already used to Luo Tan and Luo Qian, these two siblings, bickering all day long. Sure enough, Luo Qian was not convinced when he heard it. What do you know? How am I ignorant and ill-informed? You mean that older brother Qiu is not the number one? Chapter 428. Southern Xia, Northern Shen. Luo Tan unhurriedly said. Shen Miao was startled. Luo Tan was already proudly shaking her head. Everyone knows that there are two great military families in Mingqi. One is Gugu and Gufu's formidable great general Shen family, and the other is the Xia family of the residents of the Marquis of Lin, and older brother Qiu is a talent of the Shen family, and one heard that the little Marquis of the residents of the Marquis of Lin and is also a stunning talent. At that time Zhu Fu had the fortune to see that little Marquis of the Xia family once and said that this child is not a person of the pond and will one day soar to the 9 heavens. Maternal Zhu Fu. Seen little Marquis of the Xia family? Shen Miao asked hesitantly. Luo Qian also said, that's right. Older sister, why do I not know? You only know how to eat, eat, eat. How would you know? Luo Tan rolled her eyes at Luo Qian and continued, one heard that in the beginning when the Marquis of Lin and took the military strategy, one coincidentally saw little Marquis Xia in the tent. After Zhu Fu saw that little Marquis Xia, he sighed. Originally I wanted to inquire about it, but Zhu Fu told me to stay away from him and said that little Marquis Xia is a dangerous person and not to be provoked. Shen Miao's eyes hung down. She did not know that Luo Sui had seen Xie Jingxing before. But Luo Sui was actually able to see that Xie Jingxing was not simple. Before she could break free from her own thoughts, she heard Luo Tan asking, youngest Biao sister, speaking of which, you also grew up in the Ding capital, so you should have seen that little Marquis Xia before. Shen Miao paused for a moment and nodded her head. What does he look like? Luo Tan grabbed Shen Miao's arm. Is it the same as the rumors say that he is a handsome immortal? Is he more handsome than older brother Ling? The older brother Ling that she was talking about was naturally Luo Ling. Among the 3 sons of the Luo family, Luo Ling was gentle, Luo Sa was violent, and Luo Qian was lively. It was just that because Luo Ling was the most gentle, he looked the most handsome. Shen Miao said, not as handsome as older brother Ling, ah. Luo Tan released her hand, her eyes filled with disappointment. But I heard that the Xia young Marquis has a good appearance and his character is the most romantic. If a woman were to take a look at him, they would be intoxicated. You're even inferior to big brother Ling. Luo Qian looked at her gloatingly. The most important thing for a man is naturally his ability. What does it have to do with looks? Moreover, even if that little Xia Marquis is really looking for a wife, he would definitely not look for someone like you. Luo Qian smiled as he looked at Shen Miao. Naturally one would look for youngest Biao sister, this kind of fresh and gentle young lady. Luo Tan and Luo Qian immediately became a mess. Shen Miao held her forehead as she looked at the 2 siblings quarreling and felt somewhat helpless in her heart. She did not expect that Xie Jingxing's reputation would spread far and wide in the Shaochun city. Thinking about Xie Jingxing's trip to the northern borderland, he should have already arrived. This was his first time leading troops into battle as a young marshal. Although he knew that Xie Jingxing had the ability to lead troops into battle, but when he thought of the ending of this person's previous life, his heart could not help but shrink. Forget it. Shen Miao shook her head and drove away those inexplicable thoughts in her heart. In the past, she thought that Xie Jingxing was best at commanding troops and setting up formations. But now that she fought with Xie Jingxing, she realized that he was best at playing chess behind the scenes. That person's mind was calm and steady, so he must definitely be able to turn misfortune into blessing. Time passed by in a flash. Luo Tan and Luo Qian sat at Shen Miao's place until evening. The skies started to turn gloomy. Once it was the 9th or 10th month in the Shaochun city, the grasslands outside the city would be dry, but there would often be heavy rain in the city. Different from the rain in the Ding capital, the rain in the Shaochun city carried the smell of sand and was incomparably fierce. The dark clouds almost covered the entire sky, and in a short moment, it was as if it was night time. Luo Tan looked at the sky and said, "Not good. One fear that there will be hail again." Chapter 429. Why haven't Uncle and the others returned yet? Luo Qian stood up as well and frowned. Although the Luo family army had dispersed, they still needed people to guard the city. On normal days, Luo Lianing and Luo Lian Tai would be working in the guards, and when Shen Xian came, he would bring Shen Qiu along to help. On the other hand, he was supposed to return to the mansion for dinner in the evening, but he had yet to return at this time. Shen Miao looked outside and suddenly thought of something as her face changed. Luo Tan saw that Shen Miao's expression was not right and thought that she was afraid and felt somewhat strange in her heart. "Biao, youngest sister, are you afraid of hail? There was one a few days ago, and you weren't afraid then. Why are you afraid now?" Speaking till here, he patted Shen Miao's shoulders. "Do not be afraid. We have lived here for so many years and there would often be hail at this time of the year. Don't be afraid." Shen Miao did not get better because of her comfort, and her expression became uglier. As such, even the carefree Luo Qian also felt that something was wrong. He looked at Shen Miao doubtfully. "Why is Biao, youngest sister, so nervous? Is it because you are worried about Gufu?" "It's okay." As soon as he finished speaking, he heard someone calling from outside. It was the Luo family's manservant. Because he ran too fast, he even tripped. He said, "Young master, young lady, Lady Biao, madam wants you to go to the hall quickly." Luo Tan was stunned and frowned. What happened? The two Ju came to snatch things again, so master brought the two masters and General Shin to the grasslands. The two young masters are still in the mansion, and the weather is about to change. "Miss, please hurry to the main hall." Although the manservant was a little anxious, his attitude was not flustered. It was obvious that this had happened many times, and he seemed to have some experience. Luo Tan angrily stomped her foot. "Damn Turks." Luo Qian said to Shen Miao, "Biao, youngest sister, follow us in first. It will be all right." At this time, he did not forget to comfort Shen Miao. Shen Miao nodded her head. When they reached the front hall of the Luo residence, there were already quite a number of people gathered there. Both Madame Yu and Madame Ma were in the hall. When they saw the three of them, they heaved a sigh of relief. Most likely Madame Ma was afraid of scaring Shen Miao, so she walked over to Shen Miao's side and pulled Shen Miao's hands. Jiao Jiao had not seen such big hailstones before. "It is all right, later we will talk in the hall." After so long, Jiao Jiao had never told us about the matters in the Ding capital. However, he did not mention anything about the Turks at all. Madame Yu's temperament was a bit gentler, so she also smiled and said, "That's right. Let's eat lamb stew tonight. I wonder if Jiao Jiao will like it." The Shaochun city was adjacent to the grasslands, and when the two Ju did not come to rob, they would use cattle and sheep to exchange for some daily necessities. Cattle and sheep were born sturdy. After slaughtering the fresh sheep, they cut the mutton into thin slices and set up a small pot. The thin and plump slices were almost cooked as soon as they came into contact with water. Then, they were dipped in a little spicy sauce. Previously Luo Tan wanted to let Shen Miao eat the lamb here but was afraid that she would not be used to it. She did not think that it would be brought up today. It was obvious that she wanted Shen Miao to be distracted and not think about other things. Shen Miao smiled gently at Madame Yu. The Luo family always released their goodwill to the greatest extent. The two Jews' nest was in the depths of the grasslands, and every time there was a pursuit, the Luo family's army did not have enough manpower. It required all the able-bodied males of the Luo family to move out in full strength. But this year with Shen Xian and wife, it was better. Shen Xian, Luo Shuiyan, Shen Qiu, Luo Lianning and Luo Liantai all went, and even Luo Sui also followed. In the Shaochun city, only the Luo family could guard the commoners. Originally Luo Ling and Luo Sa also wanted to go, but since Shen Xian and the rest went, Luo Ling and Luo Sa stayed in the Shaochun city. The sky outside was already dark, and Luo Tan bit her lips tightly, looking somewhat sullen. Her own home was being robbed by others every year. No matter what, she would not be happy. Chapter 430. Most of the people in the hall were females, and there were also some maids and servants. Bai Lu and Shuangjiang quietly handed the snacks that were left in the afternoon to Shen Miao for her to eat. The pot was already set up in the hall, and the kitchen was cutting the lamb. The soup in the pot started to emit an aroma, but at this time no one was in the mood to be happy. Luo Qian felt somewhat hungry, and when he saw that there were some snacks beside Shen Miao, he walked over and sat down beside Shen Miao and picked up a snack to eat. Shen Miao looked at him without blinking. Luo Qian was somewhat baffled by Shen Miao's gaze and finally scratched his head and could not help but speak. "Biao, youngest sister, why are you looking at me for? Are you afraid?" The place where both of them sat was far away from Madame Yu and the rest, so ordinary people would not be able to hear their voices. Shen Miao said, "Older brother Qian, why is Waizu not willing to reorganize the Luo family's army?" Luo Qian was startled. That day when Waizu heard me speak, he was angry. One feared that it was not because there was no money to support the Luo family's army. "Older brother Qian, can you tell me the reason?" Luo Qian's eyes looked around and avoided Shen Miao's eyes as he stammered, "What reason is there?" "It is just that there is no money. Biao, youngest sister, should not think too much. Without money, how can one build the Luo family's army?" Shen Miao looked at him quietly. Her eyes were bright and moving, full of clarity, without the slightest bit of emotion. However, it was this kind of frank expression that made people unable to resist. It made people feel that lying in front of such a pair of eyes was blasphemy. Luo Qian was after all a lively youth, and his relationship with Shen Miao was not bad, so he finally gave up and said softly, "Biao, youngest sister, this matter is something that no one in our residence dare to say. But since you are one of us, I will tell you about it. Even if you know about it, do not tell others. If my father and mother knew that I told you about it, I will definitely receive a beating." Shen Miao nodded her head. "Actually, you are not the first person to mention the matter of reorganizing the Luo family's army." Luo Qian said, "The time when the Luo family's army really started to decline was not long after youngest Gu was born. At that time the Luo family was already declining and Zuzu's ambitions were not fulfilled. When Zuzu saw that he was depressed all day, she proposed to revive the Luo family's army. Grandfather already had this idea in his heart, and as soon as grandmother said so, he immediately made preparations. But at that time we were still short of money, so grandmother said what Biao Make said to grandfather that day, that the army should be famous. As long as we win the battle, His Majesty will notice this army and naturally allocate the money. At that time, the problem of the silver would be solved. Thus, my grandfather volunteered to be the commander to fight a border war." Luo Qian sighed, "Biao, youngest sister, you should have already guessed what the result was. Grandfather's great defeat had almost become a joke. The Luo family's army was already in decline, and after suffering such a heavy blow, they were even more unable to recover. Most importantly, when grandfather was leading the army to war, grandmother was seriously ill. In order to make grandfather feel at ease, grandmother didn't let her family tell grandfather the news. By the time grandfather returned from the defeat, grandmother had already passed away. Grandfather always felt that if he didn't fulfill his promise to grandmother, he wouldn't be able to face her even if he died 100 years later. After so many years, he did not reorganize the Luo family's army because he did not have the courage to face the past failures. Luo Qian put down the snacks in his hands and looked at Shen Miao, Biao youngest sister. I know that you want to let the Luo family's army regain its prestige, but our Luo family does not seek to be famous. My mother said before that one must cherish the people in front of one. Just like grandfather, if time could be turned back, he would definitely not fight that war and choose to stay by grandmother's side. So if one can make grandfather happy, even if the Luo family's army continues to be depressed, it would not matter. Chapter 431. Shen Miao looked at Luo Qian and her heart was slightly surprised. She did not think that with Luo Qian's carefree temperament, he would actually say such words. The Luo family's righteousness, kindness was indeed not fake. But to know of such a past event from Luo Qian's mouth, one's heart also sighed. This was the worst defeat of the awe-inspiring great general's life. Was it because he was overconfident, or because he didn't have any confidence in the outcome? Shen Miao thought that it was not that Luo Sui could not afford to lose this battle, but the one he could not afford to lose was none other than Luo Furen. Abandoning his ill wife and choosing meritorious service, the final outcome ruthlessly slapped him in the face. No wonder that when Shen Miao said those words that day, Luo Sui's face instantly changed color. One feared that the most hidden pain in this general's heart had been evoked. But if one is depressed like this, would Wai Zumu be happy? Shen Miao suddenly opened her mouth. Ai. Luo Qian turned his head to look at her and was somewhat puzzled. Shen Miao smiled gently. If I admire a person and he is a hero, one would hope that he would wear the treasured sword that he should wear, ride the fierce horse that he should ride, lead the bravest soldiers and obtain the most proud meritorious service. I am not willing for him to suffer grievances. Now that Wai Zumu is suffering grievances, if Wai Zumu knew, would she not feel heartache? If it was me, I would feel heartache. Luo Qian was somewhat confused by Shen Miao's words. Not to mention anything else, to say admire in front of a male like him made him somewhat aghast. Madame Ma also said that Shen Miao was a young lady from the Ding capital and was delicate and timid. One must take good care of her as she would have a shy temperament. Now it seemed. Where was there any shyness? One feared that she was more magnanimous than Luo Tan. Just as he was thinking, one heard a servant shouting outside, "Eldest young master, second young master is back." Everyone looked towards the entrance of the hall and it was the two brothers, Luo Ling and Luo Sa. Most likely it was about to rain outside as the air was somewhat humid. Both of their clothes seemed to be stained with water. Luo Ling and Luo Sa had just returned from the garrison and looked somewhat travel-worn. Madame Yu first instructed the servant to pour tea for both of them and Luo Sa downed it in one gulp. Luo Tan had already ran up and asked Luo Ling, "Older brother Ling, how is it outside?" "Seeing that it's going to hail, I've already told the commoners to go back to their houses to hide. Everything is prepared outside." Luo Ling replied with a smile, "Second younger brother and I will guard here for the night after returning. Our hall is sturdy, so there's nothing to be afraid of." "What happened to Dad, Uncle, and Grandpa?" Luo Tan asked relentlessly. Luo Sa frowned and said, "He's not back yet." Luo Tan still wanted to say something but when Luo Ling saw Luo Qian and Shen Miao walking over, he quickly said, "It is nothing. Most likely one would be somewhat busy tonight and would return tomorrow." He changed the topic, "It smells so good. Are we going to eat hot mutton tonight? Cousin has never eaten this before. I don't know if she is used to it." Shen Miao walked in front of Luo Ling. Luo Ling was 18 this year and his brows were as handsome as Luo Lianing but his temperament was as gentle and considerate as Madame Yu. It was a far cry from Luo Sa's violent and unruly temperament. Shen Miao said, "Older brother Ling, is the city guards deployed?" Luo Ling was surprised for a moment as he did not expect that Shen Miao would ask about this and replied, "It is all arranged." "How many people are there in the city guards?" Shen Miao asked. This time Luo Sa's gaze landed on Shen Miao. When these juniors spoke, Madame Yu and Madame Ma were far away. Luo Qian asked, "Why is youngest Biao's sister asking this for?" "Tonight there will be hail, so most likely no one will enter the city. 30 in the east and 30 in the west. In addition to 10 in the north, there are a total of 70 people." Luo Ling patiently answered. Chapter 432. Is there usually so many people? Shen Miao asked. After hesitating for a moment, Luo Ling said, "On normal days there would be more people, but today father and the rest had transferred them away, so there are not many city guards left. However, as long as nothing happened in the city, 70 people would be enough. The weather is not good tonight. Little brother is right, no one should enter the city. The Luo army only had so many people that it could use. In pursuing the Turks, it was only natural that it take all the useful people with it. The remaining city guards seemed to be stretched thin. Of course the Shao Chun city had been safe and sound for so many years, the city guards would at most help to capture fugitives or thieves, and there was not much use." Luo Sa stared at Shen Miao for a while and suddenly said, "You are afraid that the two Jew will attack?" Everyone was taken aback by his words. Luo Tan's jaw dropped. Luo Qian asked, "Second brother, what are you talking about? Why would the Turks attack?" Luo Sa sneered and stared at Shen Miao's eyes without blinking. "Didn't Biao youngest sister say it on the day you came? The two Jew have ambition and strength, so why can't they attack? Is this what you're afraid of?" Luo Sa's character was somewhat aggressive and facing his sharp gaze, Shen Miao nodded her head, "Correct. What I am afraid of is this." "How is this possible?" Luo Tan said, "Not to say if what you said will happen. Today father and Gu Fu had gone to the grasslands to pursue the two Jew, so how would the two Jew be distracted to attack the Shao Chun city? If he was really ambitious, wouldn't it have been better to find an opportunity before luring the tiger away from the mountain? Not only the Ming Chi people would use it." Shen Miao said lightly, "Even though the two Jew are nomads, they are not fools. After living with the people of the Shao Chun city for so many years, do you think that you would not learn something? As long as the Turks aren't fools, they would have learned it long ago." Shen Miao's uncharacteristic cold attitude made the few of them somewhat surprised. After a moment of silence, it was Luo Ling who spoke first. "Youngest Biao's sister, is this your own guess or where did you hear this news?" Shen Miao had always been worried that the Turks would attack the city, and today she was acting so strangely. Everyone noticed this point, and as long as one was not a fool, they would be able to see that something was wrong. Simply being afraid was one thing, but if he got other information from somewhere else, it would be another matter. Intuition. Intuition. Luo Sa was not angry but laughed. "Biao youngest sister, this is not the time to joke. Could it be that both older brothers have been in the city's guards for so many years and do not know the logic of taking preventive measures?" Shen Miao's expression was slightly restrained and the meekness in her eyes was restrained, and gradually there was determination. She said, "If the Turks really attack, we can prepare in advance and naturally everyone will be happy. If they did not attack, the Shao Chun city would be spared from the calamity. Would it not be a good thing? Could it be that bad things had to happen in order to be prepared? If they don't even understand this, it's no wonder that the Luo family is on the decline." "You!" Luo Sa was furious. Luo Tan's and Luo Qian's faces were also not looking good. It was Luo Ling who stared at Shen Miao for a while, and his expression did not change and was as gentle as before. He cupped his hands towards her and said, Biao youngest sister is right. It is us who are slow-witted, but based on the lack of manpower of the city's guards, it is an irrefutable fact. Based on Biao youngest sister's opinion, what should be done? On the surface it was a question, but it was to ask her to solve a thorny problem and to test her ability. Shen Miao's heart was startled. This gentle Biao older brother was not as generous as he looked on the surface. She said, if it really come to this step, it is not possible for the manpower to increase for no reason. The Turks came prepared and we are naturally not their opponent. I am after all a female and do not know martial arts. Rather than taking risks, it is better to protect myself. Older brother Ling, why not gather more guards at the Luo residence's doors to protect the Luo residence? If there is a problem, they would be able to resist for a while. When her slippery words came out, everyone was stunned. She spoke so vehemently, but at this moment, why did she show such a helpless look? For a moment, the younger generation of the Luo family did not understand Shen Miao's meaning. Luo Sa was the most depressed. He wanted to get angry when he saw Shen Miao but could not find a reason to get angry and could only sit at the side with a face full of anger. Luo Ling looked at Shen Miao meaningfully and said unexpectedly, then do as Biao youngest sister says. Everyone sat down in the hall again. One did not know why, but because of Shen Miao's words, the atmosphere became somewhat stiff. Even Luo Qian and Luo Tan seemed to be nervous. Only Madame Ma and Madame Yu did not know anything and were still instructing the chefs in the kitchen. It was until the sky was completely dark that Luo Ling's guards suddenly requested to see him. Luo Ling let him in and that guard's expression was anxious as he whispered a few words to Luo Ling's ear. Luo Ling's expression changed and suddenly looked toward Shen Miao. Shen Miao was drinking tea leisurely. Chapter 433. Shen Miao was leisurely drinking tea. At this time, when the wind was raging outside, she was sitting in a corner of the hall and slowly sipping the hot tea that Jingzhi handed over. It was as if she was really a naive and innocent young lady who was waiting for the lamb slices at the back of the kitchen to be ready so that she could sit around and enjoy the hot lamb. Luo Ling's expression became somewhat serious. Luo San noticed that something was wrong with him and followed Luo Ling's gaze to look at Shen Miao. His face also sank a bit as he asked, "What happened?" Luo Ling did not care about him and did not instruct the guard what to do, but stood up and walked in front of Shen Miao. "Biao youngest sister, step aside to talk. Cousin Ling, if you have anything to say, just say it here." Shen Miao put the teacup in her hands aside and looked at him with a smile. If something really happened, it would not be hidden. Seeing this, Luo Qian and Luo Tan also walked over. Madame Ma and Madame Yu noticed the commotion this time. They thought that there was a dispute between Shen Miao and Luo Ling and at this time, they would naturally side with the female. Madame Yu immediately walked over and glanced at Luo Ling before shaking her head in disapproval. "Linger, do not scare Jiao Jiao." Hearing this, Luo Sa sneered and said, "Who's scaring who? Big brother, what exactly happened?" Luo Qian was young and spoke without thinking. If he had any doubts in his heart, he would ask out loud. Luo Ling looked at Shen Miao and Shen Miao smiled gently at him, as if she knew what he was going to say next. That calmness of grasping everything made Luo Ling slightly startled. A moment later, he sighed and said helplessly, "The city guards have sent news that the Turks. It looks like they're entering the city." "What?" Luo Tan exclaimed. She immediately realized that her voice was too loud, so she covered her mouth. As they spoke, the surrounding maids and senior servants were far away and did not hear clearly. But the greatest taboo in the world was to shake the morale of the army. They had gathered here to hide from the hail, but if the Turks were to learn that they had entered, the morale of the army would immediately fall into disarray. Even if there was no chaos because of Luo Ling and Luo Sa, at least there would be panic. Madame Yu and Madame Ma were from ordinary families and naturally did not have the ability to protect themselves. When they heard this, they were stunned. Madame Ma immediately said, Ling Saw, shouldn't we get someone to protect Jiao Jiao and the others first? How long can our Luo residents resist? When will your father come back? Even the smartest and most capable woman couldn't help but panic when faced with such a situation. As for Yusher, she didn't know what to do. However, she still subconsciously said, why don't we hide somewhere first? Luo Tan's and Luo Qian's faces were somewhat pale. They had lived in the Shaochun city since birth, and even though they had heard Luo Sui's stories of the battlefield, but they always felt that it was something far away from them. The Turks never entered the cities, but the stories of what would happen to them once they entered the cities had no shortage of stories. Even if Ming Qi's own soldiers attacked a city, there would be a massacre, not to mention the two Jews' savage nature. Biaomei actually guessed correctly. Luo Qian muttered. Madame Ma and Madame Yu were surprised for a moment before Madame Yu looked at Shen Miao, Jiao Jiao. Guessed correctly. Biaomei previously mentioned that the two Jew might attack the city. Luo Ling looked at her and an unclear light flashed in his eyes. Biaomei must have a countermeasure. If one does not mind, please inform me. Now is the time of life and death. Luo Ling's attitude was extremely low, or it could be said that the Luo family would not have the arrogant thoughts of others. Otherwise, with Luo Ling's seniority and status, there was no need to be so humble to consult a young female. Chapter 434. When Luo Ling's action landed in Madame Ma's and the rest's eyes, they were extremely shocked. Luo Ling was the most outstanding among the younger generation of the Luo family, and now he actually wanted to consult Shen Miao. Shen Miao said, older brother Ling also did not tell me what is the situation now. Luo Ling waved his hands to summon the guard who came to report. When the guard saw Luo Ling going to ask an unfamiliar young lady, he was somewhat surprised but still honestly replying young lady, someone from the guards saw the two Jew gathering at the city gates. The general has not returned and the city guards do not have enough manpower. At the end, he was so ashamed that he could not speak anymore. Shen Miao did not have time to bother about his awkwardness and asked instead, is there a lot of manpower or not? Are the two Jews scattered or united? Luo Sa's eyes were like torches as he stared at Shen Miao. That guard thought about it and said, there are a lot of manpower. Even though they are scattered, there is the sound of horses. There should be reinforcements. The few of them suddenly sucked in a breath of cold air. Luo Ling's and Luo Sa's expression became extremely ugly in a moment. If there was some fluke just now, at this moment they were really aware of the seriousness of the matter. Having horses meant that there was an army. The army that was able to contend with the two Jew on normal days was now fighting in the grasslands. At the moment the Shaochun city did not have any real military strength, but at this time they caught up with another two Jew army. Shen Miao was right. It was a diversion to lure the tiger away from the mountain. These two Jew had become cunning and even secretly developed another army. This army might not be as strong as the one that Shen Xan dealt with, but to bathe the Shaochun city in blood, it was more than enough. Madame Ma and Madame Yu also realized that the matter was not good. Madame Ma said, why not call back all the manpower that can be used? No matter what, first protect your younger generation. It was the tradition of the Luo family since ancient times to let the younger generation leave first when there was an accident. It was to sacrifice the older generation and leave the hope to the younger generation. Luo Tan's eyes immediately turned red and pulled Madame Ma's sleeves. Mother, I do not want. If it is really not possible, then fight it out with them. Luo Qian gritted his teeth and there were two flames of anger in his eyes. In any case, we have the blood of generals flowing in our bones. Could it be that we are still afraid of those barbarians? Take the sword. At most, we will die together. Madame Ma said angrily, what nonsense are you talking about? Do you want to die if you go out now? If it really doesn't work, Big Brother and I will cover your escape. It was Luo Sa who opened his mouth. He said solemnly, there are still carriages in the residence. Escape from the back gate of the city. There is a section of mountain road. We will not be discovered even if we hide. No. Shen Miao interrupted them. Luo Sa looked at her. Do you have a way? Shen Miao shook her head. A trace of disappointment flashed across Luo Qian's and Luo Tan's faces at the same time. They did not know why, but they felt that Shen Miao seemed to have a lot of ability. Even though she looked delicate and noble and had tender skin, but every time they spoke to Shen Miao, that kind of peace and confidence made one feel at ease as if they had a backbone. But now that Shen Miao could not think of a solution, Luo Qian and Luo Tan were somewhat desperate. Then do as second younger brother says. Luo Ling said, first send you to the horse carriage and all the guards in the residence will follow you. It is enough to leave second younger brother and me in the Luo residence. I will go with second younger brother to the city guards. This was to sacrifice the two brothers to fight for time for the others. Madame Yu's tears fell in a moment and almost fainted as she pulled Luo Ling's hands. How can one let the two of you stay here? Madame Ma shook her head, we are one family. If we are to leave, we will leave together. This deadlock could not be resolved. Shen Miao shook her head and spat out two words, no. Chapter 435. Biao youngest sister, what exactly are you talking about? Luo Qian could not help but ask. Shen Miao swept her eyes across everyone and said, in the Shaochun city, the Luo family has the largest military strength. The leaders of the city guards are also older brother Ling and older brother Sa. The two Ju are also clear about this point, so if they were to really attack the city, in order to boost morale, they would definitely deal with the Luo family first. As long as the Luo family is destroyed, the citizens of the Shaochun city would definitely lose their fighting spirit and be captured. If I am the two Ju, even if I have to use all means, I will deal with the Luo family first. It is impossible for the Luo family to escape unscathed. Exposing the terrible reality without any concealment, Luo Tan could not help but tremble and looked at Luo Ling, eldest brother. Is what she said true? Luo Ling stared at Shen Miao, correct. Luo Sa's anger suddenly rose, this cannot be done, that cannot be done. Since one cannot escape and the two Ju have brought troops over, why not fight it out with them? Our Luo family has never produced a coward before, so why would we be afraid of them? There is no need to be anxious. Shen Miao suddenly spoke. The hall was silent for a moment before Luo Ling looked at Shen Miao and softly said, does Biao youngest sister have a brilliant plan? Cannot be considered as brilliant. Shen Miao's brows were calm. She was born delicate and pretty, and in the midst of all the anxious emotions, only her expression was indifferent. Everyone then discovered that from the beginning till now, Shen Miao had not shown any other emotions. The Shaochun city was at the borders and would panic when the two Ju suddenly entered the city, but Shen Miao was a pampered young lady who had been sleeping comfortably in the Ding capital, and was not surprised at all. The two Ju have brought their troops but did not advance for a long time. It is obvious that they are hesitant and have some scruples. I think that after so many years, even though the Luo family's army had dispersed, the remaining prestige is still there and can still be some deterrence. Their hearts are hesitant and probe before advancing. Even the commander is not certain, so one can make use of it. Madame Ma and Madame Yu did not understand Shen Miao's words, but felt that Shen Miao's words were very reasonable, so they did not speak for a moment and quietly listened to her. Luo saw frowned and asked, how to make use of it. Let's buy some time. Shen Miao lightly replied, my father and mother, Waizu and Jojo are not ordinary people, and one think that they would soon discover that something is wrong here, and once they discover that something is wrong, they would quickly rush back to the Shaochun city. Before that, all we need to do is delay the footsteps of this end. But how do we delay it? Luo Tan had an impatient personality and impatiently asked, based on what you've said, the Turks are so smart that they know that time is of the essence and will quickly attack. What are they afraid of? Just show them what they want to see. Shen Miao smiled gently. What they are afraid of is that the Luo family's army actually still have surplus strength, so let them see the surplus strength of the Luo family's army. Biao youngest sister. Luo Qian said anxiously, where are we going to get the Luo family army now? Shen Miao smiled gently, this will require everyone's cooperation. But before that, one do not know if both older brothers believe in me. She looked at Luo Ling and Luo Sa. It was clearly a very gentle and humble attitude, but there was a faint hostility. Luo Ling looked at her seriously, I believe you. Outside of the Shaochun city tower, it was already very dilapidated and there was a lot of dirt and dust accumulated over the years, which was the mark of time. There were generations of people here and there were also generations of heroic generals who guarded the peace and tranquility of the Shaochun city. But just like how cracks would appear on the brick walls of the city, the once indestructible doors would gradually decay. At this moment on the city tower, there were not many guards walking back and forth as they stared vigilantly at the gradually clearer sounds of horse hooves and torches. Big drops of cold sweat trickled down their cheeks. Chapter 436. The two Jew were savage by nature and it was impossible for them, who had been slacking for many years, to go against them. And from the movements, there were quite a number of two Jew. The fear was mutual and in a moment, the footsteps of the city guards became much heavier. Just when the people not far away were ready to move, someone from the city guards suddenly shouted, "What is that?" Even the sound of the heavy rain in the rainy night could not cover the surprise in the words. Everyone looked back and saw that in the Shaochun city, one did not know when large and small torches had appeared. These torches were densely packed and accompanied with the sound of the sky-shaking noises. If one listened carefully, there was even the sound of horses. When the two armies confronted each other, naturally there would be spies who climbed high to inquire about the news in the city. The city guard standing at the city gates could see it and the two Jew spies outside could also see it. Those inexplicable men and horses that appeared were especially clear in the rainy night and the sky-shaking shouts along with the messy sounds of the horses galloping on the ground, accompanied by the wind and rain. There was an unstoppable magnificence of thousands of troops and horses. It is the Luo family's army. It is the Luo family's army. Someone from the city guards shouted and almost kneeled down in joy. The Luo family's army has regained its glory. The 100-year-old Luo family had been declining for many years and the Luo family's army that remained in these years were all small businesses. The sudden shout made everyone recall the invincible grace of Luo Sui's army in the past. It was as if there was a new hope and the morale soared in an instant. The few men and horses in the city guards pulled out their swords and looked around. The blood and heat in their bones seemed to be ignited and the shouts from their mouths, along with those inexplicable men and horses in the city, rushed towards the Milky Way. The first drumbeat of energy, the second weak and the third exhausted. This sudden surge in morale and the sudden appearance of more men and horses with the name of a Luo family obviously shocked the two Jew. The Turks angrily communicated with each other, and the soldiers paused, not daring to approach. After 2 hours of this stalemate, the Turks began to sense that something was wrong. Suddenly, the sounds of fighting came from outside. This time, it was a real army. Shen Axian and his men had returned. Even though the two Jews' men and horses were spirited, but they were not as experienced as Luo Sui and Shin Xayan, who had been fighting on the battlefield for many years. Their formation was at a disadvantage and they were quickly defeated. In the Shao Chun city, at the entrance of the Luo residence, when Luo Ling heard that the soldier in front had returned to report, he then heaved a sigh of relief and respectfully bowed to Shin Miao. This time it is all thanks to younger Biao's sister. Biao's youngest sister is so smart. Luo Qian exclaimed, to think of such an idea. Shin Miao let Shin Xayan gather all the useful people in the residence, and then gather the commoners on the streets, and lit all the torches that could be used. One person held 2 torches, and then let the blacksmiths use horseshoes to imitate the sound of the horses' hooves hitting the ground. The commoners of the Shao Chun city also knew that it was a critical moment of life and death, so they pretended to shout like the soldiers. In addition to the strong wind and rain that night, it was more than enough to deceive the 2 Jews outside. When the 2 Jews saw so many torches, they would subconsciously think that there were so many people. The sound of the horses' hooves and the shouts, in addition to the fear of the Luo family's army, would make them think that there was still a portion of the Luo family's forces guarding the Shao Chun city. The 2 Jews had fear in their hearts and did not dare to blindly move forward. They tried to probe and stall for time. As long as they wait for Shin Xayan's return, everything would be settled by Shin Xayan and the rest. It looked simple, but in a critical situation, it was easy for one to lose their sense of propriety, so how would one think of such a method? Luo Sa's attitude toward Shin Miao also changed a lot. This time it is all thanks to you. Ever since Shin Miao came up with this idea, Luo Tan was filled with admiration toward Shin Miao. At this moment when she saw that the plan was effective, she pulled Shin Miao's arm and asked, Biao's youngest sister, honestly confess, did you secretly read The Art of War? I remember that the military books in grandfather's study seemed to be what you said. Chapter 437. Shin Miao smiled, just opportunistic. Jiao Jiao, do not be modest. Madame Ma looked at her warmly and said, if not for you today, we would all be in trouble. You not only saved the people in our residence, but also the people of the Shao Chun city. Thank you. Shin Miao could not help but laugh in her heart. In fact, she was really not modest, as it was just an opportunistic matter. In the past lifetime, such a thing also happened, but Shin Miao could not remember the exact date and only knew that it was a rainy day with hail. When the 2 Jews attacked the Shao Chun city, even though at the end Luo Sui managed to rush back with his troops and save the Shao Chun city from being captured, but they also paid a heavy price. In the Shao Chun city, there were numerous casualties and it was very miserable. At that time, in order to gain Fu Xiuyi's favor, she was working hard to learn the art of war. She had also asked Pei Lang about this matter, and Pei Lang had given her the same answer that day. Pei Lang said, the Turks have some misgivings, they do not dare to advance rashly. Fighting them head-on is futile, and they have lost the will to escape. It would be better for them to use the empty city stratagem to confuse the enemy. As long as they can delay until reinforcements arrive, they will be able to solve the problem. She had recorded Pei Lang's words in her diary, and it was now very clear. Shin Miao knew that she did not have any military tactics, but she believed in Pei Lang. In those years in the inner palace, in order to gain Fu Xiuyi's favor and consult with Fu Xiuyi's aides, she finally had a lot of unexpected chips. Those were all gifts that Fu Xiuyi gave her. Little cousin is so bad. When Luo Qian heard the reports of success from the guards outside, his uneasiness finally dissipated and he started to tease Shin Miao. Obviously you already had a well-thought-out plan, but you still scared us like that previously, causing us to really end up in such a bad situation. Scared me to death. Luo Tan slapped her on the head. Shameful. You can't even compare to a little girl. Aren't you the same? Luo Qian retorted. Shin Miao smiled and declined to comment. She naturally knew that it would be solved in the end, but she deliberately made it so serious, to let everyone in the Luo family understand that just by relying on the remaining Luo family army, not to mention protecting the Shao Chun city, it would be difficult to protect the Luo family. If one didn't have enough power in this world, one wouldn't be able to protect the people they wanted to protect. The Turks were eyeing them covetously, and it was only a matter of time before they made a comeback. When that day comes, what will the Luo family do? Only when they were truly aware of the danger would the Luo family feel nervous. The younger generation of the Luo family, Luo Lianing and Luo Liantai, even Madame Ma and Madame Yu, would spare no effort to urge Luo Sui to reorganize the Luo family's army. As for Luo Sui himself, he had eyes to see and ears to listen. There would always be a time when the scale in his heart would tilt. It was impossible for Shen Miao alone to persuade a stubborn person like Luo Sui, and because of her identity, it would inevitably make Luo Sui have some misgivings, but it was different for the Luo family. Sometimes, when you want to achieve something, don't use the most direct method. You need to be tactful. In her previous life, whatever Shen Miao wanted, she would directly say it and do it, and in the end, she would lose miserably. On the contrary, Mei Furen's method of twisting and turning was exceptionally brilliant. She hated Mei Furen but wanted to learn from Mei Furen what she did not have. At the dawn of the second day, the Shao Chun city finally calmed down. In this battle, the two Ju were defeated miserably. Originally because of Shen Miao's empty city stratagem in the Shao Chun city, it made the two Ju bewildered, and with the addition of Shen Xan and Shen Qiu, they suffered an unprecedented heavy blow and retreated to the depths of the grasslands. One think that for a long period of time, they would not have the energy to make a comeback. Even though they had won the battle, the atmosphere in the Shao Chun city was not relaxed. Especially the entire Luo residence. The two Ju entering the city this time meant that Shen Miao's frightening conjectures in the past few days had finally become a reality. With such a terrifying neighbor eyeing them all day long, no one would be able to sleep peacefully. At this moment her tears could not be stopped. That little Marquis Xia was surrounded by the enemy from the back yesterday, and thousands of arrows pierced through his heart. His corpse was hung on the city walls and skinned to show to the public. Luo Tan cried, "Biao youngest sister, he is dead. He is dead." The teacup in Jingzhi's hands fell to the ground with a bang, and she immediately looked at Shen Miao in panic. Shen Miao and Xia Jingxing had some friendship, so if Xia Jingxing was dead, what would be Shen Miao's reaction? What would be Shen Miao's reaction? Shen Miao sat in front of the table and quietly looked at the crying Luo Tan. Her expression was so calm that it was scary, as if what Luo Tan said was not an extraordinary event, but ordinary words like the weather was good and the flowers were blooming well. It was just that the more peaceful her eyes were, the tighter her grip on the book in front of her was. Did Xia Jingxing die? Thousands of arrows pierced through his heart, skinned to dry, and hung on the city walls to show to the public. It was the same ending as in the previous lifetime. Was it really Xia Jingxing? Shen Miao thought absent-mindedly, as if she was trying to distinguish if this news was a joke or reality. However, what floated in her mind was that day in the courtyard of Guangwen Tang, when glutinous rice dumpling tricked her out to talk, and the tall and handsome youth that walked out from the forest. That youth was wearing an ivory-white embroidered robe with silver threads. He was handsome and arrogant as he elegantly walked towards her step by step. His lips hooked up into a mischievous smile, and his peach blossom eyes had a smile that was not a smile that was very intoxicating. It was 30% frivolous, 60% probing, and the remaining 10% was a youth's romantic. "So it is you," he said. Chapter 439. In the late spring season, the grasses were long and the orioles were flying. Wherever the pitter-patter of rain fell, even the flowers were wet red. The entire small town was filled with the unique fragrance of spring, and even the sandstorm seemed to have lessened. The rainwater dripped down from the eaves and created small puddles on the green flagstones. The clear drops splashed up and seemed to be pitiful and adorable. In the birdcage hanging on the beam, the orioles were chirping, and the crisp sound of the rain mixed together was more beautiful than the music played by the best musicians. At the end of the corridor, a young female ran over in a hurry. This young female was wearing a peach-pink embroidered horse skirt, and the color was bright and adorable, but her hands were holding onto the hem of the skirt as she rushed over, which was somewhat comical. She had wheat-colored skin and was lively and mischievous as she shouted, "Biao youngest sister! Biao youngest sister! Older sister, slow down!" The youth following behind her shouted loudly, "The ground is slippery, be careful not to fall." Just as he finished speaking, the lively young female who was running in front staggered and almost fell down. Luckily she had some martial arts skills, and with a light tap of her toes, she steadied her body. She angrily turned back and complained to the youth, "Luo Qian, shut your crow mouth." Luo Qian stuck out his tongue, and behind Luo Qian, two slender figures appeared, and a dissatisfied voice sounded, "Luo Tan, be careful that you will not be able to get married like this." Older brother saw. Luo Tan anxiously stomped her feet, "If I am not able to get married, I will marry older brother Chiu." Luo Qian scoffed, "Older brother Chiu will not take an interest in a tigress like you." Luo Qian. Luo Tan made a posture to hit him. "Enough. Stop messing around." It was the gentle youth who was walking at the back who smiled, "Aren't you going to look for Biao youngest sister to talk? Go in." When they went to the innermost courtyard, they saw Bai Lu and Shuang Jiang moving the flowers and plants outside. When they saw them, they quickly said, "Young lady is waiting for you in the room." Luo Tan lifted the curtain and shouted, "Biao youngest sister." There was no incense in the room, but the maidservants found a few sprigs of jasmine from somewhere. The room was filled with the sweet fragrance of flowers. A young girl was sitting in front of the window. She was dressed in a dark black brocade robe with fine cloud and goose feathers. She wore a purple skirt with emerald patterns. The color was very dark, but it didn't make her look old at all. Instead, it made her skin look as translucent as jade. It was drizzling in front of the window. When she heard the noise, she raised her head slightly, revealing a delicate and pretty face. Her eyes were dark and spirited, her eyebrows were elegant, her lips were red, and her teeth were as enchanting as a new moon. Speaking of which, it was quite strange. This young lady's appearance was very delicate, like the morning clouds reflecting the snow, making people feel pity for her. However, her eyes and brows were gentle and combed, giving her a sense of elegance. It was as if he was a person who could bear the burden of magnanimity. Under that calm demeanor, if one looked closely, there seemed to be a hardness that was completely different from his appearance. She looked weak but was actually very strong. She tilted her head and smiled. Her eyes were quick-witted, but it also made people's hearts tremble. It was as if her casual smile had turned the originally simple study into a palace carved with flowers and jade, and she was a noble sitting on a high seat, looking down at everyone with an indifferent gaze. The few people at the door were slightly startled. Even though they had seen it many times, they would occasionally be shocked by this young lady's unintentional elegance. There was a ghostly aura lingering around her every move, and this was roughly the reason. After being stunned for a moment, Luo Tan was the first to react. With a flick of her hand, she ran in and said, "Biao youngest sister, your dress is really beautiful." She was after all a young lady, no matter how naughty and mischievous she usually was, her love for beauty was still the same. Shen Miao smiled gently, "If you like it, then let the tailor make another set." Chapter 440. Luo Tan's lips twitched, "I am unable to wear this color and can only be envious." She sized up Shen Miao and sighed. No wonder all the gentlemen in the Shaochun city kept asking about you, from older brother Ling and the rest. Biao, youngest sister, you are getting more and more beautiful. This was the 71st year of Ming Qi. 2 years had passed, and in these 2 years, Shen Miao was also slowly growing up. That slightly childish face gradually showed a delicate contour, and even the cute facial features became more refined. It was just that gentle temperament did not change and even became smoother. But the more it was like this, the deeper the magnanimity. The temperament of walking on the road attracted people to look back frequently. No wonder Luo Ling and Luo Sa's brothers would secretly inquire if Shen Miao was married. After all, even though there were beauties in the Shaochun city, but a beauty with such a unique temperament was one of a kind. Of course. Just look at whose Biao youngest sister she is. Luo Qian proudly stepped forward and placed his hand on the desk in front of Shen Miao. Biao youngest sister, do you know that His Majesty sent people to send money over again? Got a reward. As Shen Miao spoke, she kept the book on the table. Luo Qian's eyes were sharp and saw the name of the book and said curiously, Qin Country Records. How does Biao youngest sister look at Qin Country's things? Just casually take a look. Shen Miao answered without much care. Luo Sa's eyes slightly flashed. Luo Ling stared at Shen Miao and softly said, there were countless of rewards in 1 year, and recently the rewards are too frequent. What does Biao youngest sister think is the reason? He very naturally sought advice from Shen Miao, as if he did not think that it was worth being ashamed to seek advice from a young lady who was much younger than him. Of course, the 4 juniors in the room would not laugh at her. How much ability did Shen Miao have was a question worth exploring. But the 4 of them had a tacit understanding not to tell the Luo family's elders about Shen Miao's mysteriousness, as if they firmly believed that even if Shen Miao had any secrets, she would definitely not harm the Luo family. There must be a demon when things are abnormal. Shen Miao said, the Son of Heaven is overly suspicious, and with the rapid rise of the Luo family's army, one would only suppress them quietly, but the frequent rewards seem to be spreading one's name. That is a request. She pondered for a moment. His Majesty has a request for the Luo family's army, or is deliberately raising the status of the Luo family's army. As for the request, what is the request? Ming Qi's tribute ceremony is about to begin. Everyone was stunned. Luo Tan rubbed her chin and said, it seems so. When the Ming Qi pays tribute, the Qin country and the Great Liang will send people over. The Qin country and the Ming Qi are evenly matched, and the Great Liang is far stronger than the Ming Qi. His Majesty will also be afraid. Shen Miao lightly said, the Shen family army is not around and the Xia family army is heavily injured. Ming Qi does not have a country guarding military general. How can this be? That's why His Majesty wants to elevate the Luo family to deter the Qin kingdom and the Liang dynasty. Luo Tan quickly replied. Shen Miao nodded her head. So it is like this. Luo Qian said and looked at Shen Miao with some admiration. She was obviously of the same age as him, but Luo Qian always had a feeling that Shen Miao was much older than him and was even more mature and steady than Luo Ling. Shen Miao would never avoid the analysis of the imperial court's forces. Compared to the elders who were tactful and tangled, Shen Miao was much more ruthless and direct. For example, the words that the Son of Heaven is overly suspicious, the elders would never say it. The younger generation of the Luo family liked to play with Shen Miao and sincerely accept her. Naturally, it was because Shen Miao had something that was extremely attractive on her. Perhaps the people of the Ding capital were more knowledgeable than the people of the Shaochun city, as Shen Miao would always know some things that they did not know. This is not necessarily a good thing. Luo Sa frowned. The higher one is held up, the more painful the fall. Chapter 441. Correct. Shen Miao said, but it is also an opportunity. What kind of opportunity does younger Biao's sister think it is? Luo Ling asked with a smile. It's not easy for the Luo family's army to improve in the past 2 years. His Majesty has the heart to support them. Although the greater the contribution, the more dangerous it was, the Luo family army already had the strength to not be bullied. For the past 2 years, the Luo family army had been trained by the Luo family and not the emperor. This was the Luo family's military strength and not Ming Qi's. His Majesty is supporting the people of the Luo family. As long as you insist on this point, it will be fine. All under the heavens was the king's land, all under the king's command were the king's subjects, but Shen Miao had clearly divided the Luo family and Ming Qi into 2 sides. If it was heard by Luo Sui, one feared that he would faint from anger. These treasonous words were clearly preparation for a rebellion. However, when the Luo family's younger generation heard that, while they were surprised, they did not feel angry. Unlike their ancestors, when the Luo family's juniors were born, the Luo family was already in dire straits. The royal family did not allocate any silver to the Luo family's army and had forgotten about the Luo family's army at the border. The juniors were not without complaints. The more he complained, the less obvious his loyalty would be. After a moment of silence, there was a touch of fanaticism in Luo Sa's eyes as he said, Biao youngest sister said it very well. His temperament was violent and impulsive, completely different from Luo Ling's gentleness and would rarely praise anyone. Now that he was praising her, it was obvious that he agreed with Shen Miao's words. Luo Ling was more steady but even so, he did not object. Luo Qian's and Luo Tan's temperament were lively and there was no reason for them to believe Shen Miao's words, thus they did not say anything bad. Thus with this reward from Emperor Wen Hui, the younger generation of the Luo family almost reached a consensus. It was a good thing and there was no need to dissuade. Speaking of which, Luo Tan leaned on the table and looked at Shen Miao. Youngest Biao's sister is now 16 and yesterday one of my sisters came over to ask me if you have a family to marry. If not, take a look at her older brother. Biaomei, do you want to see him? The people of the Shaochun city were open and simple, and if there was a young lady that one fancied, one could inquire through friends and relatives. Luo Qian said, what nonsense are you talking about? Biao's youngest sister is only 16 and there is no rush. But you are already 18, why don't you worry about yourself? What's there to be anxious about? Luo Tan flipped her hair. I'm so pretty and smart. Even when I'm 80 years old, there will still be people proposing marriage to me. I am just worried about Biaomei. Biaomei is so delicate and weak that people are always thinking about her. It is better to find a husband to protect her. Luo Qian, if you continue to be so violent, I guarantee that no lady will marry you in the future. Who said that there is no young lady who wants to marry me? Luo Qian was not convinced, even if it is not possible, there is still youngest Biao's sister. Biao's youngest sister has a good heart. When that day comes, you will definitely marry me and help me out of trouble, right? He walked forward with a thick face. Luo Tan slapped his face away and said, why don't you take a piss and look at yourself? If Biao's youngest sister really wants to marry, our residents' older brother Ling and older brother Sa are not married yet. Who isn't better than you? If you don't believe me, you can ask brother Ling and brother Sa if they are willing to marry Biaomei. These words were inadvertently turned to Luo Ling and Luo Sa. Luo Ling was surprised for a moment and his face turned slightly red. Luo Sa also lightly coughed twice and turned his head away. The atmosphere was somewhat awkward for a moment. Luo Tan was totally unaware of it and asked with a smile while holding her cheeks, Biao's youngest sister, say it. What kind of male do you like? Handsome. Rich in silver. Good martial arts. Able to compose poems. Shen Miao looked at Luo Tan. Even though the 3 men in the room were looking at other places, their ears were perked up. Shen Miao said, able to beat my eldest brother. Luo Shuaiyan would rather Shen Miao had a cheerful temperament like Luo Tan, and watch the bustle, but have the liveliness that a young lady should have. Speaking of which, Madame Ute said seriously, Jiao Jiao is 16 this year. If she does not return to the Ding capital, sooner or later she would have to marry. Does little aunt have a suitable candidate in mind? Previously Jiao Jiao was young, but now she is 16 and should be at the age to talk about marriage. Now all the families in the Shaochun city want to marry Jiao Jiao home. Is there no one that little aunt likes? Chapter 443. Luo Shuaiyan was surprised for a moment. She was used to being carefree and it was her own bold and proactive choice to be together with Shen Axane. She had never asked others to look at her face like a normal female, thus she did not think about this. When she heard Madame Yu mention this, she was somewhat stunned. After a moment, Luo Shuaiyan then said, this still depends on Jiao Jiao's intention. Youngest Gu, you are really willing to let a young lady like Jiao Jiao marry? Madame Ma sighed, so intelligent and not irritated, with a personality that makes one dote on her. If it was me, one would definitely not be willing to let her marry out and raise her for a lifetime. Different from the aristocratic families in the Ding capital, the people in the Shaochun city would not think that it was better for a female to marry out as early as possible. On the contrary, they felt that the longer a female stayed in the residence, the more pampered they would be. Madame Ma said, speaking of which, Linger and Sar have reached the age of marrying a wife. Why not? Jiao Jiao marry into our own family? Madame Ma asked probingly. She had a sudden whim, but Madame Yu's eyes lit up when she heard it. She, who usually spoke softly, for the first time could not wait to speak. That is also all right. I see that Linger and Sar like Jiao Jiao, especially Sar. You all know that Sar usually does not even have the patience to look at young ladies, but these 2 years he would often run over to Jiao Jiao's room. Their relationship as cousins is very good, and I know my own son that Sar definitely likes Jiao Jiao in his heart. Luo Shuaiyan opened her mouth, but before she could speak, she saw Madame Yu shaking her head, but Sar is impulsive and does not know how to dote on others. If Jiao Jiao were to marry over, I fear that she would be wronged and that fellow is a blockhead. It is still Linger who is the best. Linger has a gentle temperament and is slightly older. The last time the cousins went on an outing together. Speaking of which, there were a number of people who came to Linger for marriage these few years, but Linger himself did not fancy one, thus I cannot say much about him. Linger definitely likes Jiao Jiao, otherwise he would not look for Jiao Jiao to talk after leaving the army. Madame Ma was not happy when Madame Yu spoke to herself and was not to be outdone. Eldest Saw, how can it be calculated like this? According to what you said, our families Qianer and Jiao Jiao's age are similar. They were about the same age and usually played well together. Although Qianer was a little mischievous, she was more considerate. Playing together with Jiao Jiao like this was the best. There is also our family's Tanner. Tanner and Chioer are a pair. In this case, they can be even closer. Finishing, Ma Shi looked at Luo Shuaiyan, youngest Gu, what do you think? Luo Shuaiyan, 2 pairs of ardent eyes looked at her. Luo Shuaiyan braced herself and said, this still depends on the children's intentions. She did not expect that Madame Yu and Madame Ma would have such thoughts, but when Luo Shuaiyan thought about it carefully, she did not feel that it was bad. First of all, they were all part of the same family. The younger generation of the Luo clan all had good characters and good looks. This was exactly what she liked. The official position does not need to be too high, the money does not need to be too much. The most important thing is to treat Shen Miao well and place Shen Miao in his heart. She had also experienced it from the side of a young girl in love. Not to mention Shen Qiu's side, Even these few sons of the Luo family, Luo Ling was gentle, Luo Sa was brave, Luo Qian was cheerful, and the most important thing was that they were kind-hearted. If Shen Miao was good with any one of them, the days in the future would only be sweet and not bitter. But Luo Shuayan still had to depend on Shen Miao's intentions. She also did not know what kind of person Shen Miao liked. Originally she knew that Shen Miao liked those like Fu Xiuyi, but in these 2 years, Shen Miao did not mention about Fu Xiuyi at all, which made her gradually put her heart at ease. But her own daughter had such a dull temperament, thus Luo Shuayan was worried. Why not find an opportunity to ask Jiao Jiao's intentions? Madame Ma hurriedly said, if Jiao Jiao really fancy one of our family, no matter who it is, our Luo family would burn incense and have good luck. It is better to settle the marriage early so that the sons will be smart and the daughters will be beautiful. Chapter 444. Luo Shuayan was somewhat embarrassed by what she said and rebuked, "Sister-in-law, how can there be a logic of the youngest marrying first?" Madame Ma waved her hands, "I am afraid that Jiao Jiao will be taken by someone else first." Just as they were talking and laughing, one suddenly saw a servant at the door reporting, "Furen, there is a message from the palace." The general asked Furens to quickly go to the front hall. Did the people from the palace just leave? Why are they here again? Did they send the rewards? Madame Ma got up and casually asked. It seems that it is to ask Shanghai to return to the capital. The servant answered. Luo Shuayan's actions of getting up stiffened. The front hall of the Luo residence was in a mess. It was not that the people in the hall were in a mess, but the people's hearts were in a mess. Emperor Wen Hui's imperial edict wanted Shen Exayan to bring his family back to the capital and restore the title of formidable great general. He also said to return the Shen family's army's tiger tally to Shen Exayan. 2 years ago Emperor Wen Hui had given Shen Exayan a slap in front of the world, and now he was giving him a sweet date to eat in such a big way. But it was another matter if Shen Exayan was willing to eat this sweet date or not. Luo Sui sat on the high seat. For the past 2 years, because of the reorganization of the Luo family's army, he had to worry a lot and there were more white hairs on his temples, but his prestige did not diminish. Perhaps it was because of his fighting spirit that he looked more like a general. He said, "Ming Qi's tribute is about to begin. His Majesty wants you to return to the capital so that you can rush back before the tribute. Tribute in 100 years. A dynasty would have a tribute every 100 years, and the previous tribute of Ming Qi was almost exploited by the Qin country. At that time the late emperor relied on the Xia and Shen families to barely get through. Now other than the Qin country, even the great Liang court had come. If one were to say that the Qin country only made the Ming Qi fearful, then the great Liang court was enough to make the Ming Qi afraid. The Great Liang was located in the south and the country was rich and powerful with a strong army and horses. Emperor Yongle was a wise ruler and was different from the Ming Qi's chaotic court. The Great Liang appointed people based on merit and there were more loyal people. If the Great Liang had ambitions, it was only a matter of time before they annexed the Ming Qi. It was just that Emperor Yongle did not have this intention for so many years. Of course, there was another possibility that Emperor Yongle wanted to destroy the Qin country and Ming Qi at the same time to unify the world. The world that has been divided for a long time must be united for a long time must be divided for a long time. The days of separation between the 3 kingdoms of Qin, Liang, and Qi would eventually be broken one day. It was just that one did not know when that day would come. It was obvious that Emperor Wen Hui was not willing to see this day when he was alive. But after Xie Jingxing's death, Xie Ding no longer had any interest in politics. Only the remaining Shen family had their tiger tally seized and rushed to the Shaochun city. No one knew if Emperor Wen Hui regretted it, but at the moment, Emperor Wen Hui hoped that Shen Exayan could support the situation. Especially when Shin Xayan helped Luo Sui to reorganize the abandoned Luo family's army, one could see Shin Xayan's outstanding ability to lead troops. Emperor Wen Hui was expressing one meaning: Ming Qi needed Shin Xayan. He would appear when needed, and silently retreat when not needed. Perhaps the Shin Xayan of the past had such an awareness, but the Shin Xayan who had been mercilessly treated by the royal family might not be so selfless. A scholar would die for his bosom friend. Could the imperial family of Ming Qi be considered as bosom friends? You should go back. Luo Sui said, Shin Xayan, take back all the things that you have lost. Let them see what kind of person the Luo family's son-in-law and the Shin family's son is. Shin Miao jerked her head up. She had expected that Emperor Wen Hui would summon Shin Xayan back to the capital after 2 years, and also expected that the situation in the Ding capital would have earth-shattering changes, but she did not expect that the usually old-fashioned and dignified Grand General Luo would actually say such treacherous words. She slightly opened her eyes, and when this look fell into Luo Sui's eyes, Luo Sui smiled and looked at her. Girl, you also think so. Am I right? Everyone's eyes in the hall landed on Shin Miao. Luo Lian Ying's and Luo Lian Tai's expression slightly moved, but in the end they did not say anything. Shin Miao sighed in her heart. Her little bit of skills could not be hidden from Luo Sui, this kind of all-powerful veteran general. Luo Sui had a pair of eyes that had seen the world. Perhaps from the beginning, when the Luo family's army was reorganized, he had faintly guessed what she was planning. She was grateful for Luo Sui's trust and support. The feeling of having a family member behind her was really good. Shin Miao looked at Luo Sui and her lips curled up. Yes, maternal grandfather. Luo Sui laughed out loud. Luo Ling looked at Shin Miao and there seemed to be a slight smile floating in his eyes. Luo Sa's lips also pulled up. Luo Tan and Luo Qian looked at each other and had a somewhat puzzled look. Luo Shuiyan's and Shin Qiu's eyes were complicated. After leaving the Ding capital for 2 years, now was it time to return? Take back the things that were lost. Military strength, momentum, reputation and dignity. One must let them see what the real Shin family was like. A tiger would not become a dog just because it fell off the cliff. A dragon that swam in the water would one day soar to the 9 heavens. Shin Xayan cupped his hands towards Luo Sui and said, listen to General's teachings. Chapter 445. The road from the Shaochun city to the Ding capital was long and trekking for thousands of li, thus it would take half a year to go back and forth. Shin Xayan left on the 2nd day after receiving the imperial edict. Luo Ling and Luo Tan also accompanied them. Luo Ling was asked to go by Luo Sui. As the eldest grandson of the Luo family, Luo Ling would support the entire Luo family in the future. Luo Sui's intention was to let Luo Ling follow him to the Ding capital to gain experience and also to understand the current situation of Ming Qi. Luo Sa had to stay in the Shaochun city to continue training the Luo family's army with the elders. Originally, Luo Tan and Luo Qian were not allowed to tag along. Who knew that Luo Tan would secretly climb onto the carriage and hide in the box at the back of the carriage? Only when they were halfway there did she suddenly pop out. At that time it was too late to chase her away, thus one could only send a message back and bring Luo Tan along to the Ding capital. Luo Tan was full of yearning for the Ding capital and repeatedly assured that she would not cause trouble before finally traveling with Shin Miao and entourage. Other than the front of the Shin family's army that he brought back, this time Shin Xayan also brought a portion of the Luo family's army. This group of people were personally trained by Shin Xayan and Shin Qiu and were the most elite people. If any of them were placed in other teams, they would be considered as a small leader. This group was trained by Shin Xayan himself and followed him in the name of bodyguards. From the beginning of spring until late autumn, the green trees along the way had all turned into withered leaves, swaying with the wind and falling into the soil. When the entourage of people started to add clothes, they were just about to reach the Ding capital. The sky gradually darkened and the group of them rested in an inn outside the city. Shinqiu said, "Tomorrow morning we will enter the city and find a residence to stay in." At the beginning when she left, the Shin family's residence was separated so naturally it was impossible to return to the Shin residence. Previously at the Luo family, Luo Shuiyan had told Luo Sui about the matter of splitting the family, so Luo Ling and Luo Tan were not surprised. Luo Tan rested her chin on her hand and said with a yearning expression, "Gugu, Gufu, let's find a lively place to stay, okay? I have never been to the Ding capital before. It would be great if I could find a house where it would be lively the moment I step out." Luo Shuiyan smiled and said, "Originally, the eastern part of the city was the most lively, but we haven't been back there for 2 years. I don't know if it has changed." "Isn't that simple?" Luo Tan asked the waiter who was serving the dishes, "This young brother, do you know where is the most bustling place in the Ding capital?" The waiter didn't know the identity of this group of people, but he saw that they had brought so many people with them and that they were dressed very well. Especially the young lady sitting in the middle, she was young but had an outstanding bearing. With one look, he knew that she was a young lady from a noble family. Immediately she did not dare to neglect and replied enthusiastically, "Young lady, there are many lively places in the Ding capital." The east and south sides of the city were quite lively. There are many shops in the east of the city. It's convenient for a lady to buy some cosmetics. There are many restaurants in the south of the city. If you want to eat, go to the south of the city. Luo Tan was obviously not very satisfied with this answer. She wrinkled her nose and said, "That's it." The waiter was afraid that he would make her unhappy, so he thought for a while and said, "If Miss really wants to have some fun, it's better to go to the south of the city." Recently, the people of Qin and the Great Liang came. The emperor gave them a mansion in Yanqing Lane in the south of the city to live. Yanqing Alley is in the south of the city. "What is Yanqing Alley?" Luo Tan asked. Yanqing Alley is the most expensive piece of land in the Ding capital. Shinqiu explained, "It is a good place that even the relatives of the imperial family would not be able to live in. Even the few imperial highness princes did not live in that area when they left the palace. Only the imperial brother-in-law stayed in Yanqing Alley for a period of time." Luo Tan was first surprised, "This Yanqing Alley is actually so expensive." Then she was somewhat disappointed, "But since it is so expensive, we would not be able to afford the residence there." Chapter 446. When the waiter heard this, he was startled and carefully looked at Luo Tan. Yanqing Alley was a place where one could afford to stay for a few days, let alone buy a house. Seeing Luo Tan's arrogant tone, the waiter almost suspected that he had misjudged her. This person was just a country bumpkin who entered the city for the first time. "It does not matter." Shen Miao opened her mouth. "There is a street next to the Yanqing Lane and it is adjacent to the restaurant. It is just outside the lane and the price is not that expensive. One can always afford it. It's not far from Yanqing Alley, so it's not bad to take a step back." Hearing this, the waiter was taken aback. He subconsciously said, "This young lady is right. That is indeed the case. Jiao Jiao also want to watch the excitement?" Shen Xian asked. Naturally Shen Miao did not have the temperament to join in on the fun, and today when she said it like this, it seemed that she had some interest. "Feel that it is somewhat fresh." Shen Miao smiled. "Good, good." Luo Tan's eyes lit up as she looked at Shen Miao. "Biao youngest sister, you are the best." She thought that Shen Miao deliberately said that for her and was extremely grateful to Shen Miao. Shen Miao looked up at the waiter. have the people from the Qin country and the Liang dynasty arrived? The waiter's gaze had never left the youngest girl from the beginning. He felt that when she sat there, even the chair seemed to become golden and dazzling. Hearing Shen Miao's question, he immediately replied respectfully, yes. Ming Qi's tribute will be held a few days later, and the Qin country and the Great Liang have sent people over to congratulate. Currently these people are arranged to stay in the residence in Yanqing Lane. Who did the Qin country and Great Liang send over? Shen Miao asked. The waiter scratched his head. In the Qin country it is His Highness the Crown Prince and Princess Mingyan, and in the Great Liang it is His Highness Prince Rui, the younger brother of Emperor Yonglu. Shen Miao's eyes hung down. Many thanks. After the waiter left, Luo Ling asked, what does Biao's younger sister think about the people from the Qin country and the Great Liang? Shen Miao smiled, nothing much. Just feel that it is somewhat strange. Luo Tan smiled, no matter what, when we reach the Ding capital tomorrow, we will be able to watch the excitement. In the palace of the Ding capital, in the emperor's bedroom, the thick smell of medicine filled the entire bedroom, and the incense in the incense burner made one's heart feel melancholy. On the dragon bed, Emperor Wen Hui's eyes were half closed as he leaned on the couch, and the palace beauty beside him was gently feeding him spoonfuls of medicine. This person was none other than Consort Dong. She fed him very patiently and carefully, as Emperor Wen Hui could only eat a small spoonful at a time. She blew on the spoonfuls until it was cold and tested that it was not hot before slowly feeding it to Emperor Wen Hui's mouth. While she was feeding, she gently patted Emperor Wen Hui's back to make his breathing smoother. When Emperor condominium, and also after Emperor he. After of it, when Hui's Tsong Ji he, Shen Li said. Emperor Wen Hui frowned and swallowed the last trace of bitterness in his mouth before saying, it is hard for you to remember this. Your Majesty is not afraid of bitterness, but this consort is afraid that your Majesty is afraid of bitterness. Consort Dong Shu smiled gently, Your Majesty, on account of this consort's face, eat a little of this fruit. Emperor Wen Hui was tickled by her and his eyes softened. In this palace, you are the one who understands Shen's intention the most. There were many things that could change in 2 years' time. No matter how vigorous Emperor Wen Hui was, he would not be able to resist the erosion of time. Moreover, he had so many sons who were younger and stronger than him and had bigger ambitions. The internal and external situation was critical, and he had aged a lot and his body had gradually become sickly. The Crown Prince's illness was also in a precarious situation, and the Crown Prince's faction was gradually losing. Prince Shou and Prince Jing were aggressive, and Prince Xian and Prince Li were eyeing covetously. Even Emperor Wen Hui was tired of looking at the women in the inner palace. At this time, Consort Dong Shu and Prince Ding, Fu Xiu Yi, who were aloof from worldly affairs, entered his eyes. Chapter 447. The most reassuring thing for an emperor was a son and a woman without ambition. When Emperor Wen Hui was sick, he loved to summon Consort Dong Shu to serve him. Under such imperial favor, Consort Dong Shu was as cautious as usual and would not take the initiative to talk to Emperor Wen Hui about Prince Ding's matter, which made Emperor Wen Hui even more satisfied. Occasionally he would talk with Consort Dong Shu about some unhappy matters in court. The tribute is about to begin. Emperor Wen Hui sighed. The messenger said that Shen Axayan will return to the capital in these few days. I banished him 2 years ago, and I'm afraid he still has resentment in his heart. If it weren't for the urgency of the situation, I wouldn't have invited a wolf into my house. Your Majesty. Consort Dong Shu said with a smile, General Shen is your official and naturally needs to do things for you. He will do whatever you want him to do, so why does your Majesty torment yourself? Minister. Emperor Wen Hui sneered, this official's prestige is bigger than Zhen's. How can Zhen believe that he wants to be an official? It was the same for Xia Ding in the past, but he lost his son. Now that the Xia family is unable to withstand a single blow, we can't be bothered to exterminate them. The Shen family, after the tribute, was still. I can't help feeling uneasy. Consort Dong Shu no longer spoke. At this time, if she were to speak, there would be the possibility of the inner palace interfering in politics. Therefore, he lowered his head and did not say a word, only fiddling with the enamel bowl. In Consort Dong Shu's Shufang Palace, there was a person standing at the moment. That person was wearing a luxurious robe and had a cold elegance. It was Fu Xiuyi. Compared to 2 years ago, he seemed more mature and steady, with an indescribable style. Shen Xan is resting outside the city today and will enter the capital tomorrow morning. The guard in front of him bowed and said in a low voice to him. Fu Xiuyi gripped the cup in his hand tightly and one did not know what he was thinking about. After a moment, he suddenly smiled. Gentleman Pei's divine foresight is indeed correct. Tomorrow at the capital. He said, pass down the order. All the guards at the city gates listen up. When Shen Xan returns to the capital, the entire city must welcome him. The guard cupped his hands in acknowledgement and hurriedly retreated. Fu Xiuyi stood with his hands clasped behind his back and a trace of seriousness flashed across his face. 2 years ago, the Shen family took drastic measures and messed up all his plans. Now returning to the Ding capital, Fu Xiuyi had a feeling that this was a chess piece of the Shen family's plan. Perhaps Shen Xan had long known that there would be a day when he would return to the capital, so he was so decisive when he left. Since it's like this, then how about roasting the Shen family on top of the scarlet flames once more? Let the Shen family be a target, and let Emperor Wen Hui, Prince Shou's faction, Prince Li's faction, and even the Qin country and the Great Liang keep their eyes on Shen Xan, this fat piece of meat. He was a vengeful person after all, and he hated being toyed with by others even more. Daring to scheme against him, Fu Xiuyi, the Shen family must pay the price. On the morning of the second day, Shen Xan's group set off once again. If one were to start their journey from this inn, they would be able to reach the Ding capital before noon. Since he still needed to find a house, it was best to do it as soon as possible. When they reached the Ding capital's city gates, the guards at the city gates saw Shen Xan's waist token and were immediately in awe. So it is General Shen. As they spoke, they quickly opened the city gates and welcomed Shen Xan and entourage in. Luo Tan said, Uncle, they seem to respect you very much. It seems that Uncle's official position is very high. Shen Qiu and Shen Miao frowned at the same time. That day when they left the Ding capital, those guards looked at their faces coldly and could not wait to hit them when they were down. Now with such enthusiasm, it was definitely not only because they needed him to come back to deter those people in the Qin country. Most likely it was because of someone's guidance. Luo Tan lifted the curtain of the carriage and looked out before exclaiming, this is the Ding capital. It is so big and lively, and there are more people than the Shaochun city. Ah, Biao youngest sister, the young ladies here are really good looking. How can they be so fresh and lively? Heavens, even the gentlemen are all fair and tender. Chapter 448. She was so noisy that people nearby heard her and turned their heads to look in her direction. It was not a big deal if one did not look, but when one saw, one exclaimed, it's General Shen. General Shen has returned. General Shen is back. Shen Xan already had an illustrious reputation in the hearts of the common people of Mingqi, and with the Xia family's mishap in these 2 years, the Shen family also moved away. It really made one feel a hero's end of the road. Even when the Qin country and the Great Liang's people came to the Ding capital, they would suddenly have a feeling of being unable to protect themselves. And the appearance of Shen Xan at this time undoubtedly gave the commoners a pillar of support. Immediately more and more people gathered around and exclaimed, "General Shen has returned." For a moment, the cheers of the crowd almost blocked the entire path of the carriage. The commoners were shouting fanatically, and their faces were full of admiration. Luo Tan covered her mouth. "Oh my God, Uncle has such a high reputation in these people's hearts." Luo Ling and the rest who were outside had an embarrassed expression. It was a good thing to have people lining the streets to welcome him, but it was also not bad to be chased after by others. Every year when Shen Xian returned to the capital in triumph, he would always be like this. But now, Shen Xian did not return with a body full of meritorious service. Instead, he was summoned back by the emperor 2 years after being expelled from the capital. The louder the cheers of the commoners, the louder it was, as if it was a slap on Emperor Wenhui's face. If this was not directed at Emperor Wenhui, then what was it? In the carriage, Luo Shuiyan's and Shen Miao's expressions also sank. Especially Shen Miao, her gaze suddenly turned cold. Only Luo Tan did not know what had happened and was happy for Shen Xian's prestige. The road was blocked to such a state that Shen Xian could only let the guards beside him explain to the commoners. When the commoners heard this, even though they were still standing on both sides of the street, they were not as agitated as before and also opened up a path. Mo Qing and Ah Qi first rode their horses to look for a residence. Just like what Shen Miao said, there was a street next to Yanqing Lane in the southern part of the city, and the residence there was not bad. Now that Shen Xian had spent a lot of money on reorganizing the Luo family's army, he was not as well off as before. Even so, when Shen Miao wanted to stay in the residence in the southern part of the city, Shen Xian agreed without a second word. The carriage headed south of the city. The closer they got to Yanqing Alley, the fewer people there were. This was because most of the people living around Yanqing Lane were high-ranking officials and nobles. They were either rich or respectable. Commoners could not afford to live on the land there. The commoners who had come to greet them had also dispersed. The carriage traveled smoothly. Mo Qing and the rest quickly came back to report that they had found a residence to stay in and would talk about money later. The original owner of the residence was a newcomer under the name of Shen Xian and did not ask for much money as a mortgage. When they were just a wall away from the Yanqing Alley, a gust of wind suddenly blew and coincidentally blew open the curtain of the carriage that Shen Miao was sitting in. The curtain flew up and quickly fell back down. Shen Miao's gaze slightly congealed, and when Luo Tan saw it, she asked, "What is it?" Shen Miao swept a glance at the curtain of the carriage and shook her head, "Nothing." But her heart was secretly alerted, as for a moment just now, she felt that she was being spied on. Being the center of attention was extremely uncomfortable. On a tall building in the distance, there was a young male and female holding a jade flute standing side by side. That female was as beautiful as a flower and wore a golden dress. She had big eyes and a small mouth and was covered with pearls and jades. When these tacky jewelry landed on her body, it did not look ugly but made her look delicate and charming. She looked at the distant carriage and said disdainfully, "This is the formidable great General Shen family. Such a great reputation, but it is only so." The man beside her was in his early 20s, and he bore some resemblance to her. He was considered handsome, but because his nose was slightly hooked, his entire person had some hostility that was hard to get along with. He smiled. To be able to make the imperial family of Ming Qi afraid, it is not a simple thing. Chapter 449. Crown Prince's older brother is joking again. That young female's brows slanted and she had a very arrogant look. In the beginning the Xia family of the residence of the Marquis of Linan was also lawless, and until now they are like stray dogs. That Xia Jingxing did not even leave a complete corpse, so one cannot guarantee that the Shen family will be the second Xia family. The male smiled and did not continue the female's words. On the other side, Someone was leaning on the building and the lush evergreen trees covered half of his figure, only revealing a corner of his golden robe. One hand was holding the teacup in front of him and that hand was handsome and strong. There was a white jade ring on the middle finger, making the entire hand look like it was carved out of jade. Holding the teacup close to his mouth, one could see the beautiful chin. His thin lips were slightly red and because of the tea, it was somewhat moist but it was even more captivating. The corners of his lips slowly curled up. The residence that Imoching found was a street away from the Yanqing Lane and after a turn, it was the busiest restaurant in the southern part of the city. There were endless shops and the location was very good. That owner was also very easy to talk to and Luo Shuiyan and Shen Exayan were straightforward people. The price that the owner offered was also fair and they bought the land deeds that night and the residence changed owners. In the end this end had just settled down when there was an imperial edict from the palace for Shen Exayan to enter the palace to meet the emperor the next day. For Emperor Wenhui to be so impatient, it was obvious that the situation had reached a critical point. After receiving the imperial edict, they were busy moving the things and it was already late. After dinner, they could finally settle down after such a long journey and everyone went to rest. Shen Miao and Luo Tan stayed in the adjacent courtyard. The residence here was not as spacious as the general residence but it was considered clean and tidy with a unique design. It was just that Shen Exayan and Shen Qiu were somewhat regretful that they could not train the soldiers in the courtyard. Luo Shuiyan and Luo Tan were extremely satisfied. Shen Miao did not care about these and naturally had no objections. In the end at night, Luo Tan slipped into Shen Miao's room to talk. Luo Tan wrapped herself in a cloak and sat on Shen Miao's couch. "Biao youngest sister, I cannot sleep. Accompany me to talk." "What do you want to say?" Shen Miao let Jingzhi and the rest withdraw and cut the wick of the oil lamp. At this moment she was not in the mood to sleep and casually found a book to flip through on the table but she did not read it seriously. One did not think that the Ding capital would be like this. One could not tell if Luo Tan's tone was lost or happy. "I grew up in the Shaochun city and thought that the outside was the same as the Shaochun city." One did not expect that the Ding capital was bigger and livelier than what the storyteller said. "Biaomei, I am still a little afraid." The eldest young lady of the Luo family who was out of control of the law and natural morality would actually have a day of fear. Shen Miao smiled gently. "What is there to be afraid of? Of course I'm scared when I'm alone." Even though older brother Ling was also here, but this was after all not the familiar Shaochun city. "Biao youngest sister, have you ever been this afraid? At that time Gugu and Gu Fu were in the northwest region and left you alone in the Ding capital, were you not afraid?" "There's nothing to be afraid of," Shen Miao replied indifferently. It was not scary for her to stay in the Shen residence because in her eyes, the people in the Shen residence were all trustworthy relatives. One did not know why there was no fear, but like what Luo Tan said, she was afraid of being alone outside. Wasn't it the same when she was in the Qin country? Thinking of the Qin country, Shen Miao's eyes flashed and suddenly thought of what the waiter said today. The people from the Qin country and the Great Liang had arrived. At this time in her previous life, she met the crown prince of the Qin country and the Great Liang's people when they were paying tribute. At that time, the Great Liang already had stupid ambitions, and the imperial family of the Ming Qi had always been fearful. In order to keep the Great Liang in check, the Ming Qi and the Qin country had been probing each other until Fu Xiuyi ascended to the throne, and the Qin country and Ming Qi formed an alliance, letting her, the Empress, go to the Qin country as a hostage. And the crown prince of the Qin country, Wang Fu Hao, was a very vicious person, and one did not know why, but he always liked to go against her, and Princess Ming'an was so arrogant that it made one feel afraid. Her difficult and humiliating days in the Qin country were mostly because of these two siblings. Chapter 450. As for Prince Rui of the Great Liang, Shen Miao frowned. At the beginning when Ming Qi was paying tribute, the envoy that the Great Liang sent over was not this Prince Rui. Instead, it was another relative of the royal family. This Prince Rui's reputation had already spread far and wide. He was the younger brother of Emperor Yonglu, but he rarely appeared in the royal family and the outside world knew nothing about him. Shen Miao was the Empress of Ming Qi in her past life and knew very little about this His Highness Prince Rui, thus Fu Xiaoyi did not mention much about this person. In the end, some things had changed. Luo Tan did not notice that Shen Miao was in a daze and continued talking. Originally I was thinking that if I were to make a trip to the Ding capital in my lifetime, I must pay a visit to the little Marquis of the Xia family of the residence of the Marquis of Lin and in Ming Qi, but did not think that now that I am here, I would not be able to see him anymore. At this point, there was a hint of sadness in his voice. Why didn't you wait for me to come and see me? Shen Miao was slightly surprised for a moment and the figure that she rarely thought of in the past 2 years gradually became clear in her mind. Fang Yuan returned to the Ding capital and found a servant from the original residence to talk about what happened 2 years ago. The residence of the Marquis of Lin and was one of the major events. Ever since Xie Jingxing's death, the Xie family army's vitality was greatly damaged and Xie Ding aged by 10 years in one night. Xie Ding originally requested Emperor Wenhui to resign but Emperor Wenhui did not allow it. Although Xie Ding still maintained his official position, he did not have any fighting spirit at all. He spent his days muddling along aimlessly. It was his 2 Shu sons who had entered officialdom. Even though they did not hold a high position in the court, they had a good reputation. It was assumed that after a few more years, they would be able to become outstanding figures in the younger generation of Ming Qi. It was when the news of Xie Jingxing's death reached the Ding capital, Princess Rong Axian went to the residence of the Marquis of Lin and to create a ruckus. He scolded Xie Ding for being heartless, for a marquis residence to lose Princess Yuqing and Xie Jingxing without rhyme or reason. It was really a man-eating devil's den. Princess Rong Axian was crying and angry at the same time, and almost smashed the residence of the Marquis of Lin cleanly. After that, he became more and more reclusive and rarely came out. The Su family who had a good relationship with the residents of the Marquis of Lin and had also declined in these 2 years. Not to mention Su Yu, even the son of the family who had a bright future had gradually quietened down. In summary, the decline of the Xia family was due to the fall of Xie Jingxing, and the commoners were filled with regret when they mentioned it. A romantic youth, untamed and heroic. He was originally heroic and vigorous on the battlefield, but in the end, he died a tragic death. It was no wonder that when the young ladies of Ming Qi heard of Xie Jingxing's death, they cried uncontrollably. Shen Miao looked at the dancing flame and closed her eyes. In a blink of an eye, she saw that Luo Tan had fallen onto the couch and was sound asleep. Luo Shuiyan combed her long hair with a comb. Although she was already a mother of 2 children, her hair was still black and shiny. There was not a single strand of white hair on her head. Shen Axian took off his heavy armor and heard Luo Shuiyan say, "Entering the palace tomorrow, my heart will always feel heavy. What are you afraid of?" Shen Axian walked behind her and pressed on her shoulders, comforting her. "It is not our first time entering the palace. Could it be that you are afraid of music? Don't be afraid, I'm here." "I'm not afraid of that." Luo Shuiyan rolled her eyes at him. "You and I both know that we came back this time. One fear that that person in the palace would have a knot in his heart. Originally I had talked about this matter with Father, and Father said that he was afraid that His Majesty would use something to tie down our Shen family." Shen Axian frowned. What does Furen's words mean? Jiao Jiao and Qiu'er are not married yet. Luo Shuiyan reminded, if it was in the Shaochun city for these 2 years, it would be alright if both of them got married, and at least one worry would be settled. But one did not expect that His Majesty's imperial edict would come so quickly. Now that our Shin family has regained power, one fear that many people in the capital are watching closely. Would His Majesty, in order to tie down the Shin family, make an issue out of Chio'er and Jiao Jiao's marriage? Shin Xan jumped in shock. How can this be? Nonsense. No matter what, Shin Xian's eyes would not allow political selfishness to be involved in Shin Qiu and Shin Miao's marriage. Not to mention using their marriage to place the Shin family in other forces. Forget about Chio'er, but I feel that Jiao Jiao cannot wait. Luo Shuayan said, Jiao Jiao is now 16. Not to mention in the Shaochun city, in our Ding capital, this age has reached the age to talk about marriage. After 2 years, when one reaches 18, one would be suitable to marry. One must settle Jiao Jiao while there is no news from the palace. So urgent. Shin Xian hesitated. How would there be any good families around? Moreover, one must understand the other party's character. What do you think? Luo Shuayan looked at him. What about Linger? In the afternoon, there was indeed a tailor who came to make clothes for them. In order to win over Shin Xian, Emperor Wenhui had rewarded Shin Xian quite a lot when he just returned from the palace. Among them, there were a few bolts of high-quality fabric that could be used to make clothes. Just as it was late autumn, Luo Shuayan let the tailor measure and made a few pieces for each of the 2 young ladies. Even winter clothes were made. She also picked a lot of jewelry and let others send it over, to dress the 2 young ladies up beautifully. Actually, it was not Luo Shuayan's intention to do this, as the tribute was a big matter. Ming Qi must show the richest side of the Qin country and the great Liang. The civil and military officials would bring their wives and children, and everyone must dress luxuriously and not lose Ming Qi's face. Otherwise, they would be the sinner of the world. Chapter 452. Luo Ling would also go along. This time Shin Xian intended to find a job for Luo Ling in the Ministry of War, and it was considered as training his ability. Before that, naturally he would bring Luo Ling to familiarize himself with some of his colleagues, so that he would be able to help in the future. In these 3 days of waiting, Shin Miao would listen to Jing Zhe and Gu Yu inquiring about the matters that happened in these 3 years, treating it as a plaything. But what made her surprised was that the Feng Xian pawn shop in the capital closed not long after Shin Xian went to the Shaochun city. One did not know why it only reopened a few days ago, and it was said that the shopkeeper had gone on a long journey and had just returned to the Ding capital. When Feng and Ning knew that she had returned, she sent someone to send a letter saying that she wanted to personally look for Shin Miao, but since they would meet at the tribute banquet, there was no need to make this trip. Other than Feng and Ning, Su Ming Lang also gave her an invitation. The words were crooked and he had his servant send it over behind the back of the residence, making Shin Miao not know whether to laugh or cry. Just like that, he accompanied Luo Tan to the restaurants, and in the blink of an eye, it was already the tribute ceremony 3 days later. Ming Qi's tribute was a major event for the entire dynasty, and early in the morning, the bells and drums of Southern Hill rang. The peddlers on the street were also discussing this matter. However, due to the laws of the royal family, the common people could not enter the palace. They could only listen to the sounds and movements outside the palace walls. Most people envied the families of the officials. The families of the officials could enter the palace. If the officials were a bit higher, they could even attend the tribute banquet. Looking at the luxurious banquet, it always gave people the illusion that it was a time of prosperity and prosperity. The commoners were always very simple. They only saw what was in front of them and felt that this Ming Qi's rivers and mountains would be able to continue on for generations to come. There were very few intelligent people who could see that the external enemies were not cleared and the internal troubles were intensifying. It was only a precarious state, and even if one had given face, how could one really sit back and relax? Shenxian's carriage stopped at the gates of the palace and there were already palace servants waiting outside to lead them in. Luo Tan looked around curiously and was pressed down by Shenqiu to prevent her from offending the nobles in the palace. Luo Ling on the other hand appeared to be very steady. Even though it was his first time entering the palace, he did it properly. When it was time for the ceremony, most of the civil and military officials had arrived. The sound of beating drums, playing music, and 100 salutes shot into the sky. It was grand and dignified, with an impressive heavenly might. The Emperor and Empress sat high up on the main seat. Shen Miao looked up and saw that Emperor Wen Hui was wearing a dragon robe and had a dignified expression. In a trance, there was no difference from 2 years ago. However, if one were to take a closer look, one would notice that he had to be supported by his eunuch as he walked. His footsteps were not as strong as before, and he had aged quite a bit. Fu Xiaoyi followed the other princes and stood at the side. Now that his elegance was growing, he was extremely outstanding among the princes. He was the youngest one and now that he was so handsome and slender, it caused many of the high-ranking female officials to secretly look over. In the end, Fu Xiaoyi had reached the point where he could not even hide his brilliance. It seemed that his brothers were not as assured as they were in the beginning. Shen Miao also looked towards Fu Xiaoyi's direction, but the place where her eyes landed was behind Fu Xiaoyi, was the green-robed man among the court officials. That person's temperament was aloof and out of the world, and among the court officials, there was a sense of awkwardness that was out of place. He did not look like an official, but more like a scholar. It was Pei Lang. The place where Pei Lang was standing was not far behind Fu Xiaoyi. In such an occasion, with Fu Xiaoyi's cautious attitude, it was obvious that he was relying on and trusting Pei Lang, thus he gave Pei Lang such a big face. As if he was aware of the gaze, Fu Xiaoyi suddenly turned his head over. Shen Miao's eyes moved and did not stop for even a moment. Fu Xiaoyi looked at the crowd for a moment before turning his head over. Chapter 453. And at the front of the guests, there was a male and female sitting, and both of them were very young. It was already late autumn, and the weather was actually somewhat cold. Even those daughters of officials who were gorgeously dressed would wear a cloak to prevent themselves from catching a cold. This young female was wearing a thin golden muslin long dress, and there were complicated patterns embroidered on it. With this kind of needlework, it would take at least 1.5 years to complete. This young female's eyebrows were exquisite, but her actions were not very respectful. Even when the ceremonial officer started to recite the congratulatory words, she swept her eyes across everyone with disdain, and there was not a trace of respect in her expression. This young female was Princess Ming, and beside Princess Ming was the crown prince of the Qin country, Huang Fu Hao. Huang Fu Hao was better than Princess Ming, at least he was not as obvious as Princess Ming An's unbridled performance. He was still smiling as he watched the proceedings on stage, as if he was genuinely proud of the Ming Qi's tribute. It was just that under such a smiling tiger, it made one's heart turn cold. It was Luo Tan's first time coming to such an occasion, and she felt that it was a novelty, and naturally noticed the people at the VIP seats. She thought about it and pulled the sleeves of an official's daughter beside her, and when no one was paying attention, she asked softly, "Why is there only the crown prince and princess of the Qin country? Where is His Highness Prince Roy of the Great Liang?" That young lady was caught off guard by Luo Tan, and almost jumped in shock. Even though she was somewhat displeased, she still answered Luo Tan's doubts with good upbringing. "His Highness Prince Roy of the Great Liang is not feeling well and did not come today." Luo Tan was suddenly enlightened and looked at Shen Miao at the side. Shen Miao was standing beside her, and naturally the conversation between Luo Tan and that young lady was heard by Shen Miao. Luo Tan said, "This His Highness Prince Roy's airs are really big. Is this not deliberately embarrassing the emperor?" During the Ming Qi's tribute ceremony, the Qin country and the Great Liang's people came to congratulate, but at the end Prince Rui was absent during the ceremony. Was this not a slap to the imperial family of the Ming Qi in front of everyone? Unfortunately, the imperial family of the Ming Qi dared not get angry, and not only that, they had to eat and drink well. There was no reason why, in this world, the strong were respected, and the Ming Qi would not dare to go against the Great Liang. The tribute ceremony lasted for 6 hours, starting from noon, when the sun was at its strongest, and only ended when it was almost evening. All the civil and military officials and their families could not leave. This was a long period of suffering. It was the same for the Emperor and Empress. The higher one's status was, the more attention they would receive, and the more they could not show fatigue. Even if Luo Tan was a military family's young lady, she would feel that she was lacking in strength even if she had martial arts skills. When she turned her head, she saw Shen Miao standing upright with both hands crossed in front of her, looking dignified. Luo Tan could not help but be slightly startled. She quietly asked, "Biao, youngest sister, are you not tired?" Shen Miao said, "Not tired." Luo Tan was amazed. The surrounding females were all in the dark using their wide sleeves or skirts to relax, thus it was rare to see someone as honest as Shen Miao. Luo Tan originally wanted to persuade Shen Miao to secretly relax a little, but looking at her actions, she was unable to say it out. Luo Tan had always known that Shen Miao's bearing was hard to come by. It was just that she was not one to chew on words, thus she was unable to say what kind of feeling it was, but intuitively felt that Shen Miao looked different from the other young ladies in the Shaochun city. Now at this point, there was an illusion that the dignified bearing between heaven and earth was done by Shen Miao, and that was the correct posture. Even the Empress on the high seat was not as graceful as Shen Miao at this moment. It was already rare for a 16-year-old young female to have such a graceful posture. Not only Luo Tan noticed this, it seemed that some of the noble family's young masters were gradually attracted by Shen Miao. In a group of dispirited noble females, Shen Miao was simply too eye-catching. When Luo Ling saw this, he slightly frowned and quietly moved his body to the side, covering Shen Miao by his side, isolating those slightly presumptuous gazes. Chapter 454. When Luo Shuayan saw it, she smiled in relief. Shen Miao was completely undecided. Luo Tan winked at Luo Ling, and Luo Ling's cheeks were slightly red as he turned his head away as if nothing had happened. After the 6 hours of offering ceremony was completed, it was time to start the banquet with the Emperor and Empress. Tomorrow's tribute banquet would naturally be a celebration of peace and prosperity, to let the Qin country and the Great Liang people see how rich the Ming Qi was. Shen Miao and Luo Tan had just walked a few steps towards the hall of the palace banquet when someone patted her shoulder. Shen Miao turned around and saw a familiar face. "Hey, just now I saw you early in the morning, but we were too far apart and could not come over." "Shen Miao, long time no see." Feng and Ning hugged Shen Miao back and was full of enthusiasm. Compared to 2 years ago, Feng and Ning looked even more beautiful, and the immaturity of a young female was undoubtedly exposed. She had a 100-flower bun and wore a pomegranate red long dress, looking graceful. She let go of her hands and looked at Shen Miao with dissatisfaction. "Why are you not surprised at all when you see me?" Not waiting for Shen Miao to reply, she continued speaking, "Never mind. You have such a temperament and I forgive you. But..." She looked up and down at Shen Miao, "Not seeing for 2 years, how did you become so good-looking? Could it be that the Shaochun city's water and soil are so nourishing? Why is it that you look like a different person from before?" Today Shen Miao was also instructed by Luo Shuayan to dress up properly. She was wearing a purple crescent moon phoenix tail dress, and the outer garment was embroidered with big lilacs. Her hair was combed into a cloud bun and there was a jade begonia hairpin on it and her earrings were small pearls. Her facial features were delicate and pretty but her bearing was breathtaking. As she stood there quietly, there was a gentle undignified air about her. Her pair of eyes were as clear and black as a newborn deer, causing many young males to frequently turn their heads to look at her. This female's appearance was good and had an extraordinary bearing which was the icing on the cake, making it difficult for one to forget. Luo Tan had been standing beside Shen Miao and looking curiously at Feng and Ning. Feng and Ning finally noticed her and asked, "Who is this?" "My Biao older sister Luo Tan." Shen Miao said, "This is Feng young lady Feng and Ning." Luo Tan greeted Feng and Ning. Feng and Ning had a fiery temperament and Luo Tan was straightforward and lively. Both of them hit it off at first sight and quarreled until Shen Miao's ears hurt. When it was time to take a seat, Feng and Ning greeted Feng Furen and slipped over to Shen Miao's side to sit down, so that it would be more convenient to talk to Shen Miao. Previously, during the ceremony, they had to stand according to their official positions, but now that it was time for the banquet, they could sit as they pleased. Shen Xan had just returned to the Ding capital and did not have any particularly good colleagues, so he casually found a position. But now that he was invited back by Emperor Wenhui, the surrounding colleagues naturally did not dare to neglect him and spoke respectfully. Feng and Ning whispered to Shen Miao's ears, "Tisk, these fence-sitters. Initially when General Shen left the city, why did they not welcome him? Now they are doing intimate actions and putting on airs." Shen Miao gently smiled and declined to comment. One heard Feng and Ning speaking again, "Look, your Tang Jia also came." Shen Miao was startled for a moment and raised her eyes to look at the direction that Feng and Ning was pointing at and just happened to meet the other party's gaze. After 2 years, she finally saw Shen Yu again. Ever since Shen Gui's incident, his position in the court had plummeted. He originally relied on all sides to climb up, and after Shen Yuan was beheaded, the courtiers saw him as a plague and could not wait to avoid him. Shen Gui himself did not have any ability and was getting more and more destitute every day, so he did not have the opportunity to come to such an occasion. It was Shen Wan's entire family that came. Most likely Shen Wan's career was going smoothly, as at this moment he was toasting with people with a face full of smiles. Chen Roqiu was sitting beside him and talking to her Furen with a smile, looking as satisfied as 2 years ago. But time had passed and was not as lively as before. Thinking that the second household did not have a son, old Shen Furen had also put a lot of pressure on the third household, and Chen Roqiu had to bear the pressure of old Shen Furen to give Shen Wan more branches and leaves, thus it was not easy for her. Chapter 455. The one who was looking at Shen Miao was Shen Yu. Shen Yu, Yi Peilan, Bai Wei, and Jiang Shao Xian were sitting together and their eyes were staring at her. Even though they were far apart, Shen Miao could still taste the resentment in Shen Yu's eyes. Shen Yu was wearing a smoky pink pleated dress and had her hair combed into a crown. She was now 18 years old and had a delicate and refined appearance, but her looks were pleasing. But Shen Miao's eyes paused on the bracelet on her wrist and glanced at the agate silver hairpin on her head before her lips hooked up. With Shen Yu's love of being in the limelight and fear of missing every opportunity to show herself, she was still using jewelry from 2 years ago. This could only mean that the current third household's money was not that loose. Thinking about it, old Shen Furen was extravagant in spending money, and after separating from the family, there was no Shen Xan support, thus Chen Roqiu's family must be very difficult. In addition to Shen Wan's official career, the amount of money that Shen Yu could control would be a lot less. No matter how noble one was from a scholarly family, one still had to live. Without money, how could one be tough? Actually, with Shen Yu's good looks, it was not difficult to marry an official's young master. As such, she could more or less help Shen Wan, but Shen Yu did not talk about marriage until now. In her previous lifetime, Shen Miao did not understand and even foolishly wanted to find some young talents for her. It was only later that she saw that Shen Yu's heart was big and how could ordinary young talents enter her eyes. Shen Yu stared straight at Shen Miao and her heart was filled with boundless jealousy and hatred. She could clearly see that the material of Shen Miao's clothes was only available in the palace. Previously when Shen Wan did a good job, she was lucky enough to get a bolt of it. She originally wanted to keep it to make clothes, but who knew that Shen Wan gave it to his superior. In the past 2 years, Shen Wan's official position was getting higher and higher, but Shen Yu's money was not as easy as before. Shen Yu attributed all this to Shen Xian, who took away most of the money after the separation, causing her to be in such a tight situation. She originally thought that Shen Miao had rolled to a desolate place like the Shaochun city and would not have a chance to return in this lifetime. Who knew that not only did Shen Miao return, she also returned in such a glamorous manner. Those gentlemen would frequently look at Shen Miao's side. Shen Yu's heart was filled with unwillingness and jealousy, and could not wait for Shen Miao to die. No matter how sharp her gaze was, Shen Miao only smiled faintly and turned her head to talk to Luo Tan and Feng and Ning but did not look at Shen Yu. At this moment, Celestial Empress and Celestial Empress took their seats. The original commotion gradually subsided as Emperor Wenhui smiled and instructed everyone to be happy with the mountains and rivers and enjoy themselves to the fullest. Following that, on the VIP seats, the Crown Prince of the Qin, Wang Fu Hao, and Princess Ming'an also sat down. Princess Ming'an directly ignored the etiquette of the palace and was very arrogant, and did not even greet Emperor Wenhui. Emperor Wenhui's smile was somewhat stiff, but it was Wang Fu Hao who had a very respectful appearance. Luo Tan looked around and when Feng and Ning saw it, she asked, "What are you looking at?" "I am looking at why that Prince Rui of the Great Liang is not here yet." Luo Tan said, "Is it not said that the people of the Great Liang's imperial family are all incomparably beautiful, and even Emperor Yongle was an outstanding beauty? Since Prince Rui is Emperor Yongli's younger blood brother, naturally he would have boundless elegance. I also want to see this shocking beauty." When Feng and Ning heard it, her lips twitched. "Come on." After that Prince Rui came to the Great Liang, other than His Majesty, he had never appeared in front of outsiders. Moreover, even if he appeared today, you would not be able to see his shocking beauty. "Why?" Luo Tan was puzzled. "Is he very ugly?" Before the words were finished, one heard a long and sharp shout from the eunuch outside, "His Highness Prince Rui of the Great Liang has arrived." Everyone's eyes suddenly looked towards the door. One saw a slender figure walking in from the outside with the guards following behind and that person walking in front. His figure was extremely tall and he was wearing a purple robe embroidered with gold threads. As he walked, the purple and gold robe flowed and there was a faint elegance to it. There was a rhinoceros horn belt around his waist, a white jade pendant and deerskin boots. Even if it was an extremely simple attire, it could be compared to the entire court civil and military officials. However, the most attractive thing was not these. Chapter 456. His face was half covered with a silver mask. The mask started from the forehead and stopped at the tip of the nose, but because it fitted the facial features, it showed a very smooth line. One could see the high bridge of the nose and the shape of the pair of eyes was like something in a painting. With a casual sweep, there were thousands of romantic feelings. The chin that was revealed was beautiful and the lips were thin and rosy. Even if they were tightly closed, it seemed to be a silent invitation. Everyone was silent. This young man was clearly wearing a mask and one could not see his appearance clearly, but there was a kind of ability to captivate one's soul. Everyone stared at that face without blinking. The silver mask was suffused with a cold light that made one feel a chill. However, that pair of eyes were black and bright, and seemed to contain a playful smile. It was somewhat frivolous and somewhat indifferent, making one unable to differentiate if it was warm or cold. This was a person that was able to attract everyone's attention, a youth that was as bright as the sun. He sat down on the VIP seat and his every move was elegant and noble. In contrast, Huang Fu Hao, who had good etiquette, was actually rude like a boorish person. And Princess Ming'an, who was beside Huang Fu Hao, was already somewhat silly looking at him. Emperor Wenhui laughed out loud and looked at Prince Rui. Is Prince Rui not feeling well today? Why did you come to the tribute banquet and make Shen and the other ministers surprised? Prince Rui nodded his head at Emperor Wenhui, and his attitude was somewhat casual and lazy, suddenly had the mood and came. His voice was very pleasant to listen to and had a bit of magnetism that all the seated daughters slightly blushed upon hearing it. But these words were extremely rude and presumptuous. Ming Qi's tribute banquet was a big event, but in Prince Rui's mouth, it was like an ordinary family's banquet that one could come and go as one wished. It was really somewhat condescending. The Ming Qi's officials dared to be angry but did not dare to speak. Emperor Wenhui did not dare to say anything, so what else could they do? This Prince Rui of the Great Liang had the same style of doing things as Emperor Yonglu. It was extremely presumptuous, but there was a kind of oppressive pressure. Emperor Wenhui really did not pursue the matter and let the officials continue to eat and drink, obviously intending to let the matter pass. Luo Tan was eating the pastries on the banquet as she whispered to Shen Miao, "This His Highness Prince Rui is really daring to speak to His Majesty like this. Is he not afraid that His Majesty would punish him? What crime?" When Feng and Ning heard it, her lips twitched. One is Prince Rui of the Great Liang dynasty. The Great Liang's people can only be Ming Qi's guests, and whatever the guests do is right. Even though Feng and Ning's voice was very low, she spoke vaguely and did not dare to speak too clearly since they were in the palace. If it was heard by someone with ill intentions, who knew what the consequences would be. I have never heard of this Prince Rui before. Luo Tan rested her chin on her hand and said, "He looks like a handsome man. I really want to see what he looks like under the mask." What Luo Tan liked the most were handsome males, and when she saw this Prince Rui, her eyes were almost glued onto him. Perhaps it is an ugly monster under the mask. Feng and Ning poured cold water on her, otherwise why would one wear a mask? I bet he's a rare handsome man in the world. Luo Tan pushed Shen Miao, otherwise Biao youngest sister, say, "What kind of person do you think Prince Rui is?" Shen Miao did not even raise her head, "Do not know." "Say it." Luo Tan was unrelenting, "Make a guess, this His Highness Prince Rui who is wearing a mask, or the little Marquis of the Ding capital, who is more beautiful?" Shen Miao did not expect that Luo Tan would describe Xie Jingxing as the most beautiful in the Ding capital. She was originally drinking tea, but the mouthful of tea was choked in her throat and she coughed twice, scaring Luo Tan and Feng and Ning so much that they quickly covered her mouth to avoid being rude. However, her actions were too big and those who were closer looked over. Shen Miao wiped the corner of her mouth and saw a pair of eyes in a blink of an eye. The man with the mask on the VIP seat tilted his head slightly. One did not know if it was real or an illusion, but his eyes stopped on her for a moment before moving away. His eyes were very playful. Chapter 457. The tribute banquet was naturally filled with wine and everyone exchanged toasts with one another, and suddenly there was an appearance of prosperity and peace. It was just that at the VIP banquet, Emperor Wenhui and the Crown Prince of the Qin, Huang Fu Hao, had some fear in their conversation, and when it fell into the eyes of the observant people, naturally they were well aware of it. In the Qin country, Great Liang and Ming Qi. Ming Qi was the weakest, the Qin country was second, and the Great Liang was the strongest. And that Emperor Yong Li's valiant style made the Qin country and Ming Qi fearful, thus they were very respectful towards this Prince Rui from the Great Liang. As for Huang Fu Hao, when he was talking to Prince Rui, there were many probing sounds in his words. Most of the female guests had their eyes glued onto this Prince Rui, and every move and action was pleasing to the eye because of this reason. In fact, there was no lack of outstanding looks in the Ming Qi's males, for example Fu Xiuyi, but in front of this Prince Rui, they lacked the unique elegance and nobility, and seemed somewhat clumsy. Even though Luo Tan also loved beauties, she had a quick temper and very quickly her attention was attracted by the delicacies. She tasted this, tasted that, and was very happy. Because the tribute banquet did not differentiate between males and females, the entire official family sat together. Luo Ling also sat close to Shen Miao, and when he saw that Shen Miao was not eating, he placed a piece of snowflake cake in front of Shen Miao's hands and said warmly, "Biao younger sister should also eat something else one would not have the strength to return." Shen Qiu originally wanted to give Shen Miao a piece, but Luo Ling had already beaten him to it, and did not know where to place the snowflake cake in his chopsticks. His bowl was already full, moreover why would a grown man eat snowflake cake? After thinking about it, he placed it in front of Feng and Ning, who was the closest to Shen Miao. Feng and Ning was overwhelmed by the favor, and after giving her thanks, she did not eat and just stared blankly at the snowflake cake. But just at this moment, one heard Huang Fu Hao suddenly speaking. Ben Gong heard that the formidable great general, General Shin, had returned to the capital a few days ago. Ben Gong had always heard of the formidable great general's name, but do not know if there is the honor to meet him today. When the words were said, the lively banquet suddenly quietened down. The crown prince of the Qin wanted to meet Shen Xian. What did that mean? Shen Xian and the crown prince of the Qin were not related at all, but now one of them was the great general that Emperor Wen Hui had just recalled back to the Ding capital, and the other was the crown prince of the Qin country, thus their identities were very sensitive. Everyone involuntarily looked at Emperor Wen Hui's expression. Emperor Wen Hui's smile did not change, as if this was a very small request before looking at Shen Xian, official Shen. Shen Xian quickly stood up and bowed to Huang Fu Hao. "This general greets your highness the crown prince." Huang Fu Hao smiled. "I have long heard that General Shen is brave and invincible, that even the scattered troops at the borders can form a new formation." That day when the Shen family army returned to the capital, the commoners lined the streets and cheered. Ai. He gave a long sigh. "If our great Qin also have such a talented general, then we would not have to worry for 100 years. Emperor Wen Hui's pupils shrunk unnoticeably, and the expressions of the ministers at the banquet changed as they looked at Shen Xian with complicated gazes. He said that Shen Xian could form a formation even if the army was scattered at the border. On the surface, he was praising Shen Xian's outstanding talent, but he was implicitly mentioning Shen Xian's danger. The tallest tree in the forest would be destroyed by the wind. This was a logic that existed since ancient times. And for the commoners to have such a high voice, for a general who was expelled from the capital by the emperor, it meant that in front of the imperial family and Shen Xian, the commoners were on Shen Xian's side. No imperial family would tolerate a subordinate whose voice was higher than their own. As for the last sentence, it really pushed Shen Xian to the teeth of the storm. Huang Fu Hao was trying to dig Shen Xian over in front of Emperor Wen Hui. No matter how the ministers of Ming Qi had ulterior motives, in the face of a foreign enemy, they would be united against them. The gaze that they used to look at Shen Xian was like looking at a general who had committed treason. Chapter 458. Shen Miao's eyes slightly sunk as she stared coldly at Huang Fu Hao. Huang Fu Hao was a person who liked to see others in a difficult position, as if the imperial family of the Qin country had the word vicious in their blood. Shen Xian and the Qin country did not have any antagonism, but Huang Fu Hao still refused to let them go. Perhaps this was a destined enmity. Before Emperor Wen Hui could speak, he heard a chuckle. Everyone looked towards the direction of the voice and saw Prince Rui, who was sitting at the VIP seats, put down the wine cup in his hands and looked at Huang Fu Hao. His voice was low and pleasant to listen to, with a kind of lazy drunkenness, almost with a bit of bewitching color, but his words were impolite. He said, "Since Brother Huang Fu loves General Shen so much, one can request from His Majesty. His Majesty is generous and would not disagree." It was obviously pushing the boat with the current, but when it fell into everyone's ears, it had 1,000 different meanings. How would Huang Fu Hao really want Shen Xian? He was only pushing Shen Xian to the teeth of the wind and waves to see Shen Xian struggling. If Emperor Wenhui really gave Shen Xian to him, the Qin country would have no choice but to provide for Shen Xian due to their face. But who knew if Shen Xian was Emperor Wenhui's spy? The Qin country and Ming Qi were still in a mutual probing relationship, so who would place an untrustworthy person under one's eyelids to find trouble for oneself all day long? Emperor Wenhui also thought of this point, and the strange expression gradually dissipated, and returned to his previous appearance. He smiled. Talents are cherished by the world. If the Crown Prince insists on wanting General Shen, then Zhen can only respectfully comply. This time Huang Fu Hao was placed in an awkward situation. Just now he had provoked so much, and now he had fallen into a disadvantageous situation. It was impossible to get this person back, but if one were to let it go like this, it would be like losing face. And all this was because of a sentence from Prince Rui. Huang Fu Hao looked fiercely at that masked man, as if he wanted to carve that person into his eyes. Princess Ming'an and Huang Fu Hao were together, and seeing that Huang Fu Hao was in a difficult situation, naturally she wanted to help him out. It was just that firstly Prince Rui had unlimited elegance, and she was not willing to become enemies with him, and secondly she could not afford to offend the great Liang people. She vented all her anger on the Shen family. Looking at Shen Xian, she suddenly laughed. Her voice was thin and sweet, but because of her current attitude, it seemed a bit sharp. She said, "How would General Shen dare to take back such a great general? With such bravery, Ben Gong and Crown Prince older brother would have a headache. Why don't we take back the young miss of the Shen family? I heard that the young miss of the Shen family is the apple of General Shen's eye and is a beauty. I wonder if our great Qin will have this fortune." Luo Tan and Feng and Ning suddenly grabbed Shen Miao's hands and became vigilant. Luo Ling and Shen Qing's expressions slightly changed, Shen Qiu's and Luo Shuaiyan's expressions sank, and Shen Xian suddenly looked at Princess Ming'an. As for Shen Miao, she lowered her head and looked at the teacup in front of her, as if she did not hear Princess Ming'an's words. She watched as the tea leaves in the teacup swirled around and slowly sank to the bottom of the tea. A general of a country couldn't be easily taken away, but it was easy to take away a minister's daughter. If one wanted to have a good relationship with the Qin country, marrying over a princess or a minister's daughter was a common thing in the past. It was just that no one was willing to marry to a foreign country, not to mention that after marrying over, there would be no father or older brother to help, and even if one were to suffer grievances, one could only swallow it. Shen Xian smiled, "My daughter is mischievous and cannot afford the princess love." There was no trace of politeness in his words. Emperor Wenhui's eyes were deep, but he did not intend to speak out to help. Shen Xian had such a straightforward temperament, and once it was related to Shen Miao, his attitude would be incomparably tough.